Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish for September 18th. Alton Squalon, peace to Luckmat Squamish, Awayamau. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There is an amended agenda in front of council. The amendment is appointments to the advisory design panel. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor? Those abstaining, motion carries. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. We have a few delegations, petitions, and proclamations, and just for those of you in the audience, the public hearing process will be right after the delegations, and we're going to do the development variance permit first, and then the public hearing second. So first up, unfortunately, the delegation from the United Way, Erikka Brandson, couldn't make it tonight, but I'm wondering if there's a member of council who would like to put forward the proclamation that September 20th be United Way Day in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I'm wondering, just on the United Way thing, Gary, we were, United Way was investing $400,000 in a neighborhood project. Does staff have an update on that while we're talking about the United Way?
No, I don't know.
You don't? Okay. We'll do that a different day. Next up, we have the Squamish Rivers Day Proclamation request, and we have Edith Tobe here. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Edith Tobe, resident of 41820 Rayburn.
You don't have to do that when you're done.
I'm delighted once again, to request that the District of Squamish proclaim September 23rd Squamish Rivers Day. This is a custom that we have been running since 1998 in one way or another. So we're basically at our 20-year anniversary for that as well. And it's been a delight every year to be able to engage with the municipality. And I'll give you more on the events in a moment, but if the council sees fit, I would love to have the adoption for Rivers Day being proclaimed.
I am happy to move that we proclaim September 23rd as Rivers Day in Squamish, and seconded by Councillor Pryor. Why don't we, Edith, go ahead and speak to the events, and then we'll call the vote.
So the event is being run from 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock at McNaughton Park, once again in Valley Cliff, where we're hoping to remove some invasive species, have lots of activities. Rotary Club is going to come with their family barbecue. It's an event that's suitable for all ages, and we'll have activities, displays, and lots of opportunities to learn about some of the organizations within the municipality who are involved with the environment and with rivers and with the watershed, including the Stream Keepers, the Eagle Watch program, the Future of House Sound Society, My Sea to Sky, and there's others that just escape my brain at the moment. But we're expecting around 8 or 9 different groups to set up displays and talk about what they're involved with. And a real great chance to learn about some of the important water courses within Squamish, all salmon bearing, and we hope to put a little TLC into Little Squamish Creek that runs through McNaughton Park. And working on municipal parkland again, just to work with the staff to help to get on top of some of the issues that we're having, including erosion and the spread of some invasive species, and the trail going alongside Little Squamish right now, I understand, is closed, but hopefully that's something that can be repaired for in the future. So those are the main highlights, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Council, any questions for Edith? I will just say thank you to you and all the volunteers and all the people involved. Rivers are really the lifeblood of our community. We have a confluence of many rivers and their tributaries, and they really are integral to our ecosystem here. So, and thanks, the amount of work that Watershed Society, Stream Keepers, Squamish Environmental Society, the list goes on of groups that are passionate and actively working towards a better environment in our community, and we would not be the community we are without all that volunteerism and that passion, so thank you for bringing that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just a reminder, that date is
Sunday, September 23rd.
this Sunday, McNaughton Park in Valley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Louise Walker with the Squamish Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, thanks for having me here tonight. My name is Louise Walker. I'm Executive Director of the Squamish Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight representing a partnership with Tourism Squamish, District Tourism Squamish, Squamish Arts Council and the Squamish Chief. We are working together to host the municipal election, all candidates meeting. I'm sure you all know there's an election coming up. And so we are very excited about this opportunity. We're going to be looking at business and economic development, tourism, the arts and everything Squamish. So it's coming up October 1st at Brandson Park. We have chosen that venue because it's the largest in town and we want to invite the community. We're not going to be charging people, we have lots of volunteers set up, and so I'm here today to request that Brandon in kind to waive the fee for Brandson Park. So that's why I'm here, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, and just through to staff, I guess, Barry, is the recommendation is that this comes through council contingency to pay for it, or that the recommendation?
That would probably be Matthews, but that would probably be the best place, yes. I'm sure we can cover that.
So are you moving that we
I'd like to ask a question.
okay, go ahead.
So, interesting, and it's always pretty interesting time.
Councilor Cryer, I'm going to confine you to questions around the grant name.
Yes, Mayor. Let me finish. So it's always good with the all candidates meetings, and now, a lot of people rely on those, although there's the online stuff. And I'm just wondering if you'll have anyone speak on fake news that I see coming online, some attack ads and stuff like that. Because I noticed, we got Trump down in the States, we got, all these crazy leaders getting in because of this fake news. And I don't know if our little town has any way of handling it, but I do see a lot of crap coming on here. So I don't know if you can
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about how to manage fake news, but what I can tell you about is how our meeting will be held. We will be having 2 stages, one stage for the mayor candidates, one stage for the councillors. So the mayor candidates will be put before a panel of partners, and so that will ensure that we're able to ask questions that are important to the community. And then it will be open Q&A to the audience, so I can't control what gets asked, although we will have a moderator. And then with the councillor candidates, it will be open Q&A to the audience. So the moderator will obviously monitor people's questions, but we want people to have the opportunity to ask.
I might come and ask a question about that.
You come and ask.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just the questions that you're asking the candidates, will they be screened in advance? Will they be able to see them before, or will they be asked just on the fly?
On the fly.
So I'll move that we give the grant name and take it from council contingency, seconded by Councillor Kent. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the agenda to item 6. Nope. 7A1. Development permit number 471, 1870 Dowd Drive. And because this is a development variance permit, there is a public process with regard to the variance, so I'll just read this statement. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variances. Variance to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw, section 23, local commercial C1, subsection 23.3, maximum height from 1068 meters to 15.78 meters, and that's 10.68 meters to 15.78 meters. And section 4, general regulations, subsection 4.11A, projections into required setback to extend the eaves from a maximum of 0.76 meters to a maximum of 3.42 meters. After I have confirmed that it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization. And please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. But before we do that, I'll call on the planning department to outline the project in front of us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Elaine Naseby, and I'm a planner with Community Planning. This is Jonas Veliniskas, the Director of Planning. So this evening we are bringing forward development permit application number 471 with variances located at 1870 Dowwood Drive. The subject site is 83,000 square feet in size. It's located at the southwest intersection of Candleliss Road and Dowwood Drive. It is adjacent to Highway 99 and visible from the highway. It is accessible with a recently developed right-in and right-out turn from the highway. And the site is constrained with a riparian setback as well as a hydro corridor. The site was subdivided in 2006 and has remained a vacant site. There have been no previous development applications for this parcel. The proposed mixed-use building consists of commercial units at grade with residential units above. The commercial units total 14,346 square feet and amount to 31% of the building use. The residential apartments, numbering 37, range from 1 to 3 bedrooms. The proposed floor area ratio is within the zone's maximum FAR of 0.75. The height proposed is 4 stories plus 1 story of underground parking. And the massing, the 4th story steps back to reduce the building's massing. So these images show the building's features, including glazing, the materials, which I'll describe later, and the timber roof and awning features. These show perspective views around the building as well as the streetscape. The underground parking level is for the residential units, and it's accessed off of Dowwood Drive. The commercial units are accessed at the second level off of Candleliss Road. And there are 2 loading bays provided. The bike parking is secured, and it's at the same level as the commercial units. Our zoning bylaw requires 107 stalls for this building, and our zoning bylaw requires 103 stalls, and they are providing 107. There's also a pet wash at that same level. The site design incorporates pedestrian circulation with regards to the existing streetscape on Candleliss Road. So the commercial units are accessed with stairs at each unit. There are also 2 accessible ramps that lead to a raised walkway. The corridor trail, the site design allows space for the corridor trail future expansion. And the streetscape includes amenities for the neighborhood, street trees, benches, bike racks, as well as a waste bin. The usable open space is provided above the commercial level, so on the first residential floor. It is a courtyard that includes covered space, fire pit, barbecue, and seating. The rest of that same level, so the roof of the commercial level, is largely green roof. So the form and character includes basalt stone cladding, horizontal cedar siding, wood soffits, metal louvers at that underground parking level, and exposed timber roof features. The building architecture addresses its visible location from Highway 99 and provides interest similar to other mixed-use buildings in the area, including alpenlofts and the galleries. This project was presented to the district's advisory design panel in March. The applicant has addressed ADP comments, as you can see outlined on the screen there. So the development permit is requesting 2 variances. The first is a height variance. And as you can see outlined in red, that is the difference between the C1 zone's maximum height of 10.68 meters and the requested 15.78 meters. It's a variance of 5.1 meters and essentially allows that 4th floor. The other variance relates to projections into required setbacks. Both Tantalus Road and Dowd Drive have generous road right-of-ways, and we do see those projections highlighted on the screen. The relation that this proposed building will have to the existing neighborhood is shown on the screen there. So the parcel to the south is the galleries. It is a mixed-use 2- and 3-story building. So there are 10 live-work units in that building, and then the rest are residential apartments. And there we can see the height. So the galleries building was built to a 12-meter height, and the proposed building seeks 15.78 meters. We see the elevation on Tantalus Road as well as from the highway. Also across Tantalus Road, we have the Greenside Estates duplexes. So they are built to a height of 8.87 meters. And here we see the elevations in relation to one another there. In response to some public comment that we had expressing concern, the architect did do some view studies from the Greenside Estate duplexes. So what we're looking at here is from the first floor of the duplex on the left and the second floor of the duplex on the right. And we see on the left there is the permitted C1 height and the proposed height above. Further, there was a study done to the duplexes that are located south of the building, so not just those directly across the street, but also those to the south. Similar, although on this screen they're arranged slightly different. So we've got the first floor of the duplex on the left side of the screen and the second floor on the right, with the change based on the height variance. These images show how the fourth floor is stepped back. So the top two images are the first and second level of residential, and then that other image is the fourth residential, showing how it steps back. And in that section, we're looking along Tantalus Road, cross-section at the building stepping back along Tantalus Road, sorry. This application proposes to provide 2 units of affordable housing. They are both 2-bedroom units of over 1,000 square feet each. And similar to other housing agreements in the district, for this affordable housing, they would be offered to those earning low to moderate income. The rent amount would be set at 30% of the maximum income for rental or renter households in Squamish. Yes, and so this slide shows the 2 units, level 2 on the left, level 3 on the right, those 2 units, the 2 bedrooms. So this application also falls under Development Permit Area 11 from our previous OCP. And so the streamside protection and enhancement area setback typically would be 30 meters. They are requesting 22.2 meters. And it is supported by a qualified environmental professional's riparian area report. Part of the rationale is that the parcel cannot be reasonably developed within the zoning regulations and a 30-meter setback, as well as the application is requesting that projections into required setback variance to minimize further SPIA intrusion. The image on the screen, that green color, shows what would be 30-meter setback. And with this, on- and off-site compensation and restoration is proposed. The development permit application aligns with council priorities for healthy community. It would add additional employment and commercial space to the neighborhood, as well as residential density. The economy, it's creating employment space, and those 2 affordable units may be for local employees. And then environment, as mentioned, the riparian areas on-site as well as off-site to be preserved, protected, and enhanced beyond their current state. There would be a need for increased operational budget to maintain the new streetscape. The district has received public comments, both indicating support as well as concern. Concerns include the impact to the Greenside Estate duplex views, both those directly across as well as those located to the south. The impact to the galleries building, roof deck views to the north, as well as a loss of privacy for those roof deck units, and a resulting impact to property values. Comments that we've received in support for the need in the community for affordable housing and the provision of 2 units with this development, the provision of commercial space for the local neighborhood, and that with its location adjacent to the highway, that residential density is suited in that location. So the proposed development permit satisfactorily meets the development permit area guidelines in our previous OCP, which is what this is being reviewed under, as that's when the application was received. So the recommendation to council is that the development permit be approved. There would be landscape bonding required, as well as riparian bonding, the adoption of a housing agreement bylaw that is under, it's being developed concurrently, as well as registration of an encroachment and boulevard maintenance agreement, as well that the development permit include the height variance and the projections into required setback variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Are there any questions for clarification purposes for staff? Councillor Kent.
Is that small stream that I see in the background here on GIS, is that Fishberry?
On the on the parcel?
Yeah.
This is Chris Wickham.
Hi, Chris.
Director of Engineering. Through the mayor, yes, that is Fishberry Creek.
Any questions for clarification? Councillor Elliott.
The galleries, is it also C1 zoning?
Mayor Heisman, through you, I believe it's the larger Garibaldi Springs comprehensive development zone.
Yeah, it's a CD12, which is part of the hotel and so. Any other questions for clarification, Councillor Reyes?
Yeah, I just wondered if you could go back to the slide that shows the view across the street. Yeah, you can just hold that for a second. Just because it's labeled floor 1 of duplex and floor 2 of duplex, I gather the view on the left is what this development would look like if it was not built above the height.
The C1 zone.
Mayor Heisman, through you, I believe that I actually made a mistake in creating this slide. My apologies. So what are we looking at? So it looks to me like we're looking at the 10 meter maximum in the zone. On the left-hand side, at the bottom is level 1 of the townhouse. The image to the top is you're on the 2nd floor of the duplex.
Other way around, I think.
Yeah, I've
So the top one
mislabeled
is
it.
from the first floor, and the second is from floor 2, because you see more of the mountains in behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the left is the current zoning, and the right is the proposed
Drop that.
building with variances.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that was it.
Any other questions for clarification, Councillor Lee?
So I know we're talking about the lot not being developable to its full potential because of the setbacks and the hydro right-of-way. And we talk about the hardship being financial. So you couldn't build a shorter building on this lot? It looks like there's room for a building.
You could certainly build a smaller building on this lot.
So what's the hardship for variances?
So the hardship is a large portion of this site is encumbered with right-of-way as well as riparian areas.
And Mayor Heisman, through you, that was specific to the riparian going from 30 meters to 22.2. So the environmental consultant supported that reduction, and that was their rationale, was that, yeah.
So I think I could expand on that a little bit. My understanding is the constraint is really around the parking, that you can't have half a stall. So by coming all the way to the 30-meter SPIA, which is today's regulation would be 4 fish-bearing stream, you take out enough of a parking stall that you'll lose a whole line of stalls, and you don't have enough parking to support the residential.
I was more curious about the variation on height. The variance request for height. I understand the variance request for this setback, but what's the hardship that creates a height variance?
And does it need a hardship to request variance?
That's exactly it. It doesn't need a hardship to request a variance. With Board of Variance applications, you have to have a hardship. With variance permits, you don't. But the case that the applicant has stated is because of the reduction in the buildable area that they propose to build the building up in order to regain some of the floor area ratio that is allowed otherwise in the zone, given the property size.
Councilor Pryor?
Thanks. So part of the reason there's so much commercial is because there's residential to support it?
Mayor Huntsman, through you, I think they're wanting to relate to the galleries and the Alpenloft streetscape that provide commercial at-grade.
And C1 requires it, does it not?
Does C1 require?
C1 requires it, that's right. But it doesn't require a minimum percentage as our C4 would require.
Can you flip one more back to see the, one more like this?
Or let me ponder that. Councilor Chanel?
Thank you. The affordable units is, staff feels that 2 is an adequate number for despite having a height variance.
Mayor Huntsman, through you, they are truly affordable, so they're not just purpose-built
Yeah,
rental, they're affordable. So it is definitely a contribution to the community.
And it's not technically a rezoning application.
Yeah, and it's not necessary.
Mr. Wienerskis, you wanted to?
I just wanted to add that the 2 might seem low on its own compared to the proposal, but it's more of a reflection of that additional story and how much density is added by one more story.
I don't see any more hands from council. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the variance DVP, please put your hand up and I'll ask you to speak to the podium. Yeah, come on up, state your name and address, and if you represent yourself, the business or an organization.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Kathy Smiley. I'm here representing W. Dow Limited. We are the proponent of the development. I'm currently residing, and Ray and I currently reside in a suite at 41205 Rockridge Place. I'm going to try and do this in 5 minutes. So I just thought it was important to talk about a bit of the history. We're a small family business. We've been working in Squamish since the 1970s. Many of you know my father. The property at 1870 Dowa Drive was part of a larger subdivision that we did several years ago. And this is the last undeveloped piece of land we have. We want to finalize the subdivision, so we've applied for the DP, and it's C1 zoning, so we've gone for the mixed use C1 zoning rather than we did not want to apply for actually rezoning. The property is just under 2 acres, as Elaine has said, but it has a water course that goes through it, and so the majority of the land is unusable. There's approximately half an acre that can be developed. I don't know if you looked at the RAR report, but I just want to reiterate that the channel, the water course, is associated, and the associated culverts were constructed in 2002 as part of a habitat agreement with DFO. The aquatic and riparian features developed as part of the agreement were part of a larger strategy that connected the pond system on the Garibaldi Springs Golf Course to a series of wetlands and channels to Thunder Creek. The agreement established preservation and habitat enhancement areas as well as designated areas for development which were subsequently filled and serviced. Had we known back then that things were going to change, we could have actually routed that water course farther down the property, so we wouldn't be in this predicament now. But the setbacks were different then, and the plan at that time was to have the building or buildings, there was a few different restaurants, etc., that were interested in the property. On the east side and on the west side, close to the highway, would have been the parking. But based on the current requirements, we are left with only half an acre to develop, and we've worked really hard to come up with a design that fits the footprint, fits into the neighborhood, meets the parking and other requirements, and it is the best use for the area and is financially feasible. Throughout the design process, we have been very sensitive to the height and the look of the building. We've put 5 penthouse-type homes on the top floor. They're set back 10 or more feet, so that we didn't want that stacked look. This is much more interesting, and it, and keeping in mind the neighbors, etc. We wanted it to be pleasing to everybody. But we are limited by parking. Parking has a huge effect on what we can and can't do there. Currently the lot's being used to store materials for Skyridge. We're very anxious to get it cleaned up. We've asked the contractor to arrange for storage of the materials on Skyridge. But we feel the project will finish off the subdivision neighborhood. We're going to provide 1 to 3 bedroom units that are a very good size. As well, there'll be some much needed commercial area, hopefully a coffee shop, which is a lot of people have requested. And we will provide the two bedroom affordable rental units. When we started this process, we were told it was 5%, so we fit into the 5%. We recently opened up Dowd Drive to Highway 99. That was done by our company, and it's been received very well by the residents and decreased some traffic along Tempest Road. The highway opening was largely in anticipation of the development of this lot, and it was put on the covenant of the property at the time. So we've done numbers. Unfortunately, we have to go up because we can't go over. We can reduce the setback to the water course. We can maybe go up that way or delete some parking, but it basically comes down to numbers. The soft costs here are so high, as you all know, and all the building costs. That's where we're at. I'm very happy to answer your questions, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. I'll see if there's anyone else who would like to speak to the variance. I'm going to ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this DBP? And I'll ask for a third time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this DBP? Seeing none, I'll just see if there's any further questions from council at this point. Don't see any hands. I will move the recommendation with variances, and if it's second, I will speak to it. Second by Councillor Pryor. Yeah, I generally think this will be a great addition to the neighborhood. One of the challenges with the galleries is it was sort of commercial at a dead-end road, and they were very challenged to become a viable destination for retail. So adding more retail there, I think, is going to be really valuable to the businesses and the galleries as well. I can support the height variance mostly because you're getting 2 affordable housing units with it. I was a little challenged by it at first, but I think that it actually is very justifiable. I think the affordable units if they're actually affordable units, is really a valuable piece to the community. The actual effect on the neighbors, because of where it is, it really only has one adjacent neighbor to the south. If this building was to the south of the galleries, I might think differently. But this unit is, the height of this unit is on the corner of a pretty wide road, so I think it is an acceptable height variance. I also think the projections into the setbacks is acceptable as well. So I'm happy to support this. I think it'll be a good addition to the neighborhood. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Black and Wolf.
I'm going to oppose this variance. I think that it's inappropriate for the site. And time again, we hear from applicants who can't seem to wrap their heads around what the existing zoning is. Now certainly when properties are subdivided and when people acquire property, they certainly very well know what type of rights of way are on these properties, what type of riparian zones are on these properties. And to squeeze a bunch more density in this area, I think is very inappropriate. It's on the outskirts of our town, it's more sprawl. There's no transit service down there. And that's why you need all that parking. You know, you wouldn't need all that parking if your building was downtown. But this is why they need parking. So it's totally inappropriate. Obliterates the view for the poor neighbors across the street. I mean, it's just greedy.
Anyone else want to speak to this DVP? Councillor Race.
Thank you. I must admit, when I read the report on the weekend, I was concerned about this. This is a variance process being used to add, in effect, another floor to a building. And I wondered if maybe it wasn't more appropriate to go through rezoning for that and go through the public process. I sat and watched this presentation. I have to say that the graphics that staff has produced have been very helpful for me, sort of trying to get this thing square in my mind. But I'm going to support this. I tend to agree with some of the mayor's comments. Also, I do see a hardship here, contrary to other councillors' opinions. The riparian area setbacks did change from the time this property was first acquired and initial development happened until now, and it is significantly larger. If the building was able to go back or spread out more, we wouldn't have this issue. But this variance doesn't add density to the zoning requirement or the zoning restriction. It really just, instead it squeezes it in, goes up a little bit. It will certainly block some of the views from across the street, but so would a building that complied with the existing zoning. All in all, I think the benefit to the neighborhood and the area is allowable and really exceeds the problems that might happen with that top floor. So I am supporting this.
Thank you. I'm also going to be supporting this. Adding an extra floor, but adding the 2 extra units of affordable housing is what changed it for me. Is basically it's to have an extra floor of extra housing. These are apartments. I'm sure some of them will become rental units, but also the fact that the 2 units are affordable. And I don't think it's out of form character for this neighborhood. It also adds employment space in the region, so more of those people in the neighborhood will be able to walk to work, including the people that live above in the units. I actually had one of the first commercial units on Tantalus Road, and I can't say it was an unviable spot. I was able to grow out of that, use it as a beginning place for my business, and then eventually move into a larger space because of its success. So I don't really find the commercial units unviable in that region.
Councillor Elliott.
So I totally understand the need for the adjustment because of the changes in the streamside protection rules, and don't mind that variance nor the encroachment of the awnings into the setbacks. But I do think the building looks fine with 3 stories, and so I can't support the height variance. So I won't be supporting this one.
Anyone else want to speak to this? Councillor Kern.
Yeah, well, you know, height's a funny thing. I look at that there, and the property to the south there, that top floor, they're not even going to see that top floor. The 3 stories that they have there is all they're going to see because of the setback. And then, I mean, I do sympathize with the houses across the street. In their front yards, they won't necessarily get a big view of the, the mountains in their front yards. They won't also get any sound from the highway. The sunset's still in the same spot. I like the commercial downstairs, and I think that in order to get that on a commercial, you probably need a little bit extra residential to cover that. It's a bookend for that whole area out there. That new one up the hill, all those cars are going to be coming down, and they need stores at the bottom there. You want people to walk the stores, and it's the entrance to the highway. bus stop will come there, Jason, once the people get there, because that's a natural loop. Go around there, out to the north, and through Brackendale. I don't know, I'm not familiar with that aspect of this.
Anyone else want to, Councillor Kent?
Yeah, I can support this. I think the 2 affordable housing units coupled with the commercial space on the ground floor will help service the rest of the neighborhood. And it's a nice finishing piece to that last remaining lot, and in keeping with the other buildings, excuse me, around it. I can support the variance.
See any more hands? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Blackman, Wolf, Councillor Elliott, motion carries. Next up, for timed items, we have the public hearing for district and zoning bylaw number 2200. Shall read this statement, so you don't have to say this twice. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to council respecting the matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw OCP implementation priorities. 2620-2018, District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2500-2017, Amendment Bylaw Quest Neighborhood Park number 2624-2018, District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw number 2200-2011, Amendment Bylaw Quest Single and 2-Unit Dwelling number 2625-2018, and District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw number 2200-2011, Amendment Bylaw RS1 2-Unit Dwellings number 2626-2018. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the planning department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other persons addressing council. I feel like I should know this off by heart now. I now call on the planning department to introduce the bylaws.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Gunn. I'm a planner here at the District of Squamish. Tonight I am here for the public hearing of zoning bylaw amendment 2620, 2625, 2626, as well as OCP bylaw amendment 2624. These bylaws the bylaws being considered today include priority regulatory amendments that reflect OCP policies in past committee of the whole discussions. There are 3 proposed zoning amendments and 1 accompanying OCP bylaw. The bylaws were given first and second reading on July 24th. On September 4th, Council considered the OCP amendment bylaw 2624 and resolved that the consultation was sufficient and appropriate. I will discuss the bylaws in the order shown on the screen. No changes have been made to the bylaws since second reading. The first bylaw, number 2620, is the most comprehensive and includes a range of topics, which I'll address in order on screen. First off, with missing middle, this bylaw would permit a number of missing middle housing forms in the RS2 zone. Triplexes would be permitted on corner lots in the RS2 zone with reduced exterior side setbacks. Cottage clusters would be permitted. A number of siting size and dimension regulations are established for this housing form. The bylaw also amends the maximum floor area ratio to incentivize missing middle housing forms rather than larger lots, as is currently the case. The bylaw establishes maximum habitable areas for accessory dwelling units above garages to prevent transferring garage space to living space through the use of carports. The bylaw also mandates vehicle access to garages built below accessory dwelling units, something currently missing in the bylaw. An indoor amenity space requirement is established for apartment developments over 20 units. The requirement is 2 meters squared per dwelling unit. Open space requirements are expanded to encompass the university zone and the C1 local commercial over 0.5 hectares. This departure from previous, a number of changes are proposed for the zoning in the university sub-area. Student and faculty housing definitions are amended to exclude single-unit dwellings and duplexes. The UC1 and UH1 zones are amended to mandate university campus commercial development occurs in the University Village Center along Helfand Way. University campus commercial is added as a permitted use in the University Village Center UH1. Setbacks are established for all uses in the UH1 zone. The UH1 map schedule is updated to correct an error in mapping regarding identification of an Area 2 block within the UC1 zone. There's a number of active transportation items. The requirement for a bike commuter trip end facility is proposed for industrial or commercial uses based on the required number of Class A bicycle spaces. A building the size of municipal hall would be required to provide one shower, wash basin, and toilet for this use. Bicycle parking requirements are updated to include minimum dimensions for Class A spaces. 5% of Class A spaces are required to have additional length to accommodate cargo bikes, and 30% are required to provide access to electrical charging outlets for electric bikes. There are a number of new zones that are established. An ecological reserve zone is established and applied to public land designated Conservation Ecological Reserve in the OCP. A neighborhood park and school zone is established and applied to land in the Sea to Sky University subarea plan intended for school or park use. The area of the university that is proposed for this U5 park and school zone, P5 park and school zone reflects the area identified in covenants registered on title of the applicable properties. This area is different from the area that's currently identified for school or park use in the sub-area plan. There's a covenant on title on the properties, and it mandates the dedication of parkland. And so this area was chosen as it does not involve a loss of development rights in establishing this park zone. A separate bylaw is proposed to update the sub-area plan to bring that into alignment with this, and I'll talk to that in that OCP amending bylaw. A groundwater protection zone is proposed and applied to the majority of the area identified as a proposed groundwater protection zone in the District of Squamish Powerhouse Springs Well Protection Plan. The bylaw includes a minor amendment to avoid penalizing energy efficient construction through thicker walls. The portion of exterior wall thickness beyond 150 millimeters is excluded from gross floor area calculations. A number of supportive housing uses are added to the uses permitted in all zones. These include assisted living facility, community care facility, transitional housing, and emergency shelter. And finally, there are 2 housekeeping items included. The current bylaw definition of habitable space is replaced with the floodplain management bylaw definition of habitable area to improve clarity of interpretation. The term accessory residential dwelling is replaced with the term caretaker dwelling to distinguish from accessory dwelling units. Bylaw 2624, zoning amendment, Quest Neighborhood Park is intended to, that should be OCP amendment. Bylaw 2624 OCP amendment, that is an OCP amendment. It's to align the OCP with the new neighborhood park and school zone. In this image, figure 4 on the left is the current sub-area plan in this Sea to Sky University sub-area plan. This is the image that identifies where land uses are appropriate, and the school park zone is identified in a location that does not match the covenant. In the proposed rezoning, we are matching it to the covenant, and so that figure 4 needs to be replaced so that the OCP and the zoning bylaw are aligned. Bylaw 2625, zoning amendment for Quest single and 2-unit dwellings is intended to restrict single-unit dwellings and 2-unit dwellings within the Sea to Sky University sub-area plan area to areas where these housing forms have already been built or where subdivision applications have been received for construction of these housing forms, identified in the figure on screen. This will result in further development of the UH1 land being restricted to multifamily development. This amendment reflects the sub-area plan's intention to ensure the majority of development in the university area is multifamily. I should point out that some landowners who would be affected by this regulatory change have expressed concern with this change because single-unit dwelling provides a higher development value than multifamily. And finally, Bylaw 2626 is a zoning amendment. It's intended to include 2 dwelling units as permitted uses in the RS1 and RS1A zone. This bylaw includes an amendment to the maximum floor area ratio in the RS1 and RS1A to incentivize missing middle housing options in line with Bylaw 2620. This provision is in its own bylaw on its own, separated from the other amendments because the staff is uncertain of the level of community support and council interest in this piece, but is presented for consideration. Finally, regarding notification, the legislative statutory requirements for public hearing notification have been met. Notice was published in the Squamish Chief on July 12th and July 19th. Distribution of notices to individuals was not required since the bylaw affected more than 10 parcels with more than 10 owners. However, as a courtesy, notices were mailed to owners of large parcels with development potential in the university sub-area. The public hearing was included in the district e-news. Since the public hearing was scheduled, staff have met with the president of Quest University and a resident representative of Bethel to discuss the intentions of the policy changes. Comments have been received from School District 48, Quest University, and a developer in the university area. School District 48 indicated a high level of interest in the dedication of land for future use as a school site in the university area. Quest indicated a strong interest in a comprehensive planning process to update the sub-area plan for the university. And then comments from the developer included a request for a comprehensive planning process to update the university sub-area plan, and also indicated some concern with a number of the elements of the zoning amendments that included the provisions that dictate the minimum amount of commercial floor space at Quest that is at the top end of what is contemplated in the sub-area plan, the requirement that Quest commercial floor space be built before occupancy of other uses in those buildings, the preclusion of single and two-unit dwellings on the Quest campus lands, and the site-specific zoning for the school park site in the university sub-area. That concludes the presentation for the purpose of the public hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll go to council first to see if there are any questions for clarification purposes. Councilor Ray?
So I just want to be clear about the RS1, RS2 zoning. So the report says RS1 will be rezoned to RS2, and RS2 will permit triplexes on corner lots.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman. We aren't rezoning we're just amending the RS1 to add 2-unit dwellings, and that's in a bylaw on its own. That is one provision in one bylaw that adds 2-unit dwellings to the RS1. So that allows duplexes to be built in the existing RS1 zones. The RS2 zone is being modified to allow triplexes and cottage clusters, and that is in the larger bylaw 2620.
Thank you.
Councilor Craig?
Yeah, thank you. And we're kind of just doing our homework on this, so I mean, we're just catching up to when the university had a growth spurt, and you know, there was some concerns about maybe losing an opportunity to build some of the other types of uses that were contemplated in the master plan. And we're just tracking that, right? We're just making sure that everything's kind of on track.
Yes, through you, Mayor Heinzman. This is in reference to the Quest University.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the official community plan, some of the policies that came out of that were, one, to update the sub-area plan for the university area. There was a vision that was presented in the sub-area plan. Some of the development that has occurred in the time since that sub-area plan was developed hasn't been very closely aligned with the original plan, and the opportunity for achieving that initial vision of the university area is in some areas has been lost. There is still opportunity to achieve parts of that vision, but the changes to the zoning that are being made are to trying to preserve the opportunity for the vision that was presented in the sub-area plan. So ensuring that there's space set aside that could become park, trying to ensure that the bulk of the housing in the university area is multifamily development, elements like that.
I can just say compliments to staff.
Okay, we're still in the public hearing process.
Right?
Save your comments. Questions for the public hearing? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
The consultation, the letter of request that didn't feel like there was adequate consultation. I read the list of consultation. All of these amendments were presented during the OCP. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, when the OCP was developed, and that's a very high-level plan. We did not dive down to the specificity that the zoning amendment has gone down to. So there are high-level pieces that we're trying to achieve in the zoning bylaw. So they weren't discussed at that level in the OCP
The feedback
process.
from Quest that they didn't feel that there was adequate time for consultation, is that, do you, can you address that comment?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Heinzman. The intention of this bylaw is, and one of the other responses to this zoning bylaw was that there's a feeling that this is a bit of a Band-Aid to try and correct, from one of the letters that you've received, I imagine, speaks to this being a bit of a Band-Aid to try and fix the problems. And I think that's an accurate portrayal. There are a number of significant failings, I would say, in the existing zoning bylaw that leave us vulnerable to development that can happen right now and preclude achieving a vision. And so this has tried to come in at a rapid pace following the adoption of the OCP to ensure that we preserve the opportunities that would meet the vision of the OCP. There is a need for a deep level of consultation with all of the stakeholders in the university area. Staff have reached out to a lot of them individually, but we did not have the time to do a comprehensive process. That should be done as part of a sub-area planning process. I think it's critical for the future of the university. But if we don't get zoning in place that preserves some of those opportunities, when we do that consultation, we won't have as much room to achieve the vision of the sub-area plan.
Thank you very much, Matt. That's an excellent response.
Thank you. Councillor Ray?
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm still back to this RS1, RS2 thing, because unless I'm reading the report incorrectly, what it seems to say to me is that we're going to take RS1 and make it RS2, and RS2 can have triplexes on corner lots. But if I understood your answer before, that's not the case. But the report doesn't seem to say that, so.
Yeah, my apologies to you, Mayor Heinzman, if I wasn't clear. We are making the RS1 look very much like the RS2. So you're accurate. We're just not changing all of the zones. Right now, essentially, Western Squamish, or Eastern Squamish is RS1, and Western Squamish is RS2, essentially along the highway this split. And we're not applying RS2 to all of the lands that are currently RS1, but we're changing the RS1 zone to look like the RS2 zone, and the RS2 zone is getting the triplexes added. So you're accurate in how you're explaining it, except we're not doing it in the mechanism that the way you're explaining it. Does that make sense? We're just adding permitted uses. So you can do a duplex where you used to only be able to do a single family, and you can do a triplex where you used to only be able to do a duplex, but only in the corners.
I think I understand that then, okay, because I didn't read the report that way. So I'm still going to call it RS1.
Yes.
We'll just be able to have a 2-unit building on it.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but yes.
But you can't have a triplex.
Not in the RS1, in RS2. I can understand where the confusion is coming from.
Mr. Buxton?
So now, the reason Councillor Race might be a little confused, I don't know if you have access to page 40 of the agenda.
Apologies if there's an error in there.
40 and 41.
Don't apologize for bringing those in.
But I'm Canadian, so.
It does quite clearly say rezone all RS1 properties to RS2, so I can understand where Councillor Race is coming from.
Yeah.
That is from a July 3rd report. So that initially that was the proposal, but it has changed since then.
Any more
Apologies for
questions?
lack of confusion.
Any more questions from council before I go to the public? Don't see any hands. I have one speaker on my list, Scott Bennett. Please come up and state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business, or an organization.
Hi, Scott Bennett, 1018 Tobe Way, representing myself. Just looking at the 2-unit dwelling being added to RS1, it seems to me this would completely eliminate all single-family zoning from all of Squamish. And I understand the smart growth principles and why we want to densify, but to apply that, just one principle to all of Squamish, I think is somewhat misguided without adding those principles, without using all of those principles in that area as well. I mean, when I look at Tobermory, If we start adding density to that, we already have a parking problem up there. In the winter, we can only park on half the street, and we are already almost full. I moved up there because I was looking for a single-family residential area where I could raise my children. I think if we start densifying, we're going to lose the community spirit that we have to a degree in some of these areas. We've got a great spirit on Tobe. I love the neighborhood. We have community garage or street garage sales. We have a fireworks show every year. I just fear that that's not why I didn't move there for more density. I moved there for the single-family home experience, and I wouldn't want to see that go missing from Squamish, and that's what I fear that this amendment will eventually do. Because as time goes on and houses get replaced, they are all going to become duplexes in all of the RS1. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I don't have any more names, but I'll call to see if anyone would like to speak at this public hearing. Yeah, please come on up and state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Judy Croston. I live in Brackendale on Cottonwood Road, and I'm a little concerned about the RS1A zoning. Many years ago, the council of the day decided to blanket Brackendale R2. So we now have duplexes everywhere. We have parking issues. Judd Road's a mess. All the duplexes now have, I suspect, legal and many illegal suites in them. And the RS1 zoning, I believe, is the VLA lands. The 1A is the VLA lands, if I'm correct. Now, those lands were given to the veterans who fought in the war as compensation for missing the opportunities to get a trade or whatever. So I guess I think those lands should be excluded from this R2 zoning. Leave them as they are, single-family units. I don't think we need any more density in that area as well. Mountain Road is a mess right now because it's one of the main arteries from the Highlands. And if you include the BLA lands in this duplex zoning, then you're creating more traffic problems. My dad was a veteran, so one of those lands was his. That's where I grew up. And I would hate to see those lands become multiple dwellings. It wouldn't be fair. That's all I have to say.
Thanks very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I don't see any hands, but I did see Councilor Brandson.
Well, just to that lady's comments on the VLA land.
We're in a public hearing process, Councilor Brandson. So if you have a question.
I'm going to ask a question. I'm referring it to what she just said.
Thank you.
I have to refer it first. We're supposed to be doing a neighborhood plan of all the estates. Would it be prudent to wait till then to put the density in there?
Through your Mayor Heinzman, yeah, if there are concerns around the implications of adding the 2-unit dwellings to the single or the RS1 area, then it could be that change could be considered as sub-area plans are done for individual areas of Squamish, and I'm sure as part of sub-area plans, contemplation for change in zoning will be an integral piece. And so that those could be addressed on one-off neighborhood by neighborhood situations with deeper level consultation.
I just want to add that none of our existing neighborhoods have a sub-area plan. So on that basis, then we would have to do all the neighborhoods in order to change the density.
Thought that was the plan.
That is the long-term plan.
That takes some time. Councilor Chappelle.
Thanks. If we are upzoning properties to RS2 then, obtaining community amenities for zoning, sidewalks, and amenities for future density. How do we achieve this with CACs?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, yep, that is a sacrifice that's made, absolutely, in a rezoning of this sort. If we change the designation, or change the permitted uses and add 2-unit dwellings, we forego any type of charges or amenity contributions that might be made through a rezoning process that was at the behest of the applicant or the landowner.
Just want to add that things like development cost charges will still be charged. They wouldn't be waived.
DCCs, but not CACs.
Not CACs, no.
I'll go back to the public. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask for a second time. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask for a third time. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing none, I will give council one last chance to ask a question. Councilor Pryor?
Thanks. So, with the RS1, RS2, we're blanketing this across the community.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, yes, all of the existing RS1s would then be allowed to do a duplex. So it's a broad change, which is why it's...
So this is in the name of density, the name of affordable housing.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Heinzman, the intention is to provide an option where people could increase density, perhaps have smaller units that may be more affordable, but it will increase the value of those lands and potentially raise the price of property values.
So areas like the estates, someone wanting to come and turn their house into a duplex, would just apply for a permit to get one and tear the house down, put in a duplex.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a significant change because duplexes could be built on any RS property in the community.
Duplexes with suites and carriage houses?
Yeah, with other zoning changes that have occurred, there is the opportunity for suites to be built in these properties. So, and that is an issue that has been raised, that with that level of density, because the inability to collect CACs, there are some trade-offs, balancing the opportunity for missing middle and some more affordable housing options versus some of the money that can be secured through upzoning.
Councilor Spell, you have a question?
Yes. I'm concerned with thinking that this makes affordable housing. Upzoning a property, actually, and is there any thought to amalgamating properties, and what happens when 4 single-family homes get bought up and they're RS2 zoned? Can you just add in, you just end up being able to add in the density or upzone?
So you, Mayor Heinzman, in a scenario where there was amalgamation of properties under this zoning, they would still only be able to build the duplex. So it wouldn't lead to a multi-family there. That would be a rezoning, which would require, a discretionary choice of council.
Has thought been put into the fact that the lots can be now sold off for a higher price for duplex, and it actually increases the price of housing, and that single-family homes can be adjusted to have suites that we haven't really done enough work around, and the amount of we can now have laneway homes and apartments and single-family homes. So single-family lots can be densified as it is. When you upzone it to RS2, you actually lose out on affordability.
Yeah,
And staff just said that.
Yeah.
And through your
I just wanted to
Mayor
make the point about single-family homes.
It's a public hearing, just submit, we have to just, you can make your point when we deliberate for reading, but this is a public hearing.
In an earlier staff report from a discussion with committee of the whole, we tried to lay out that there really is a trade-off. The benefit is that you could get smaller units, but some of the downsides are that if this happens broadly across the community, there's quite an increase in density, and under our current scenario, the infrastructure may not keep up as given that could happen by right, and it would have likely an upward effect on land prices. So perhaps with smaller units in the long run, you would have some more affordable options, but in the short run, it would probably cause some prices to rise, and there would be impacts on infrastructure if it was broadly applied. So there are trade-offs for sure.
Thank you, Matt.
Any more questions from council? I'm going to ask 3 times before I close the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to make further representations at the public hearing? I'll ask for a second time. Is there anyone who wishes to make further representations? I'll ask for a third time. Is there anyone who wishes to make further representations? There being no further submissions, please note that council members are not permitted to receive further submissions or hear either a proponent or an opponent to an application once the public hearing has been concluded, and any and all communications must be channeled to staff. The council can consider third reading in this meeting if they so choose. And there being no further speakers, I will declare the public hearing closed, and thank you very much for all those people who made submissions. We are going to get back into the, we've done our time items, so we'll get back into the agenda. Consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is for anyone who has an emergent issue that has to be addressed or heard prior to the next council meeting. I don't see anybody. On to 8A1. Is that right? District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2020-2011, amendment bylaw 60001, Squamish Valley Road, number 2564, 2017.
Evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. I'm here tonight to present a rezoning application at 60001 Squamish Valley Road for consideration of first reading. The subject property is located at 60001 Squamish Valley Road, west of the CN Railway and immediately south of the bridge over the Cheakamus River. The property is currently split zoned resource and C3 tourist commercial. Official community plan designation is restricted industrial. Surrounding properties to the east are zoned C3, resource, and general industrial. Properties to the south are zoned resource. The restricted industrial land use designation applies to lands situated exposed to natural hazards and allows for resource-related activities, open space and outdoor recreational activities where the predominant activity is not enclosed within a building, does not require permanent structures or buildings, and is not reliant on municipal servicing. Temporary use permit number 45 was authorized by Council on June 2nd, 2015 and extended to September 30th, 2019 on May 1st, 2018. Temporary use permit number 45 allows the following uses: 1 event and up to 2 weddings per month from May through September, except for 2 events in July 2018, limited to the holding of the Blessed Coast Festival and the Hooves and Hearts fundraiser, to a total of 20 event days per calendar year. Blessed Coast Festival for July 27th to 30th, 2018, and unspecified dates in 2019. Event use within the 20-day maximum limit can include events such as small acoustic and film venue, seminars, training camps and workshops, horse events, weddings and family events, corporate retreats, team building events and colloquiums, trade show and exhibition events, charity and fundraiser events, and arts, cultural, and political events. TUP 45 has a number of conditions, including event controls and environmental requirements that must be adhered to for the duration of the permit. The permit expires on September 30th, 2019. Chikai Ranch has been offering a unique venue for events since TUP number 45 was issued in 2015. This rezoning application proposes to rezone to a comprehensive development zone to permit the permanent use of events currently permitted as temporary through temporary use permit number 45. This proposal is unique in that no development of the site is proposed. The creation of the CD92 zone will formalize the operations that have been ongoing since 2015 when TUP 45 was originally approved. The site is located in a primary floodway and is a restricted densification area. Controlled densification area policies support park, open spaces, natural habitat, recreational trail, greenway corridor, barrier-free public recreation, or agricultural uses in controlled densification areas and primary floodways. The rezoning is not proposing an increase in development potential, such as an increase to permitted dwelling units, floor area ratio, or height, which is consistent with controlled densification area policies. A quantitative risk assessment was submitted as part of the temporary use permit application. The risk assessment designates a raised platform on site as a refuge site from flood and debris flow activity. This slide shows the location of the primary floodway on the subject property and the raised platform. The property is well suited for rural events given the size of the property and the lack of immediate neighbors. The raised refuge platform provides a safe place to accommodate campers and is located on the western side of the property, far from the properties with residences to the east. For the duration of TUP 45, Chikai Ranch has demonstrated the ability to host successful events and remain largely compliant with the conditions of the TUP. There is a lack of lands within the district where rural events and camping are accommodated and are properly serviced. Comprehensive Development Zone 92 seeks to create a property-specific zone for Chikai Ranch. Permitted uses would include agriculture, aquaculture, arts and culture, assembly, campground, commercial recreation, single-unit dwelling, telecommunication tower, trade contractor facilities, and accessory uses. These uses would legitimize the temporary uses permitted under TUP 45. To address the permit conditions of TUP 45, staff will rely on a quantitative risk assessment that will be registered on title as a restrictive covenant should the bylaw be given initial readings. The QRA will designate the maximum number of people that the designated safe refuge site can accommodate for the associated uses in the event of a debris flow or flood event. The risk assessment must also address long-term maintenance provisions for the raised platform to ensure it can remain a safe refuge site. As the majority of the site is located in a primary floodway, there will be a provision in the zone prohibiting new buildings, structures, and placement of fill within the primary floodway in accordance with integrated flood hazard management plan policies. As Chikai Ranch is not connected to municipal services, the district has requested an engineered solution that will demonstrate to the satisfaction of Vancouver Coastal Health that the associated uses approved through this rezoning can be accommodated on-site and detail any occupancy restrictions that may be associated with the proposed on-site servicing. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. The project was posted on the district's development showcase. No requests for public information meeting were received. One comment has been received so far. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 2564-2017 be given first reading, and that prior to scheduling a public hearing, the submission of a quantitative risk assessment be completed. Staff alternatively recommend that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 2564-2017 be given first and second reading, and that prior to scheduling a public hearing, a submission of a quantitative risk assessment be completed, or that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw 2564-2017 be referred back to staff for further review. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. I just have a quick question about only one reading versus both readings tonight. Does staff see any challenges to doing both readings tonight? Is there additional information or modifications that would be necessary?
We have yet, sorry.
Or a public, we've only got one comment, so there was no public meeting. So that wouldn't necessarily be the case either. So I'm just curious what the pros and cons of first and second reading.
Staff have yet to receive the quantitative risk assessment yet, so that will take some time to review. And given that we have not had a chance to review that yet, we thought it would be better to delay second reading.
Just to add to that, because if there's something in the assessment that comes out could impact the actual zone, we would have to go back to first reading.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? Council Pryor?
No, I'll move first reading.
Well, let me just see if there's any questions. Councillor Scott? Nope. Second this one. Okay, moved by Councillor Pryor, second by Councillor Scott. Councillor Pryor, you want to speak to the motion?
Well, I do, and this group has been before us a few times asking events up there, and I know we grilled them pretty good, and I think they did a great job. I think they're doing a great job, and we need that kind of venue in town, so I support it.
Councillor Pryor, just to clarify, did you move first reading or first and second reading?
Well, I thought we decided second reading was not.
I just wanted to, you're the mover, I just wanted to clarify, first reading, okay. Councillor Elliott?
I'm happy to support first reading, but I just thought of a question. Once the zoning changes, do the restrictions come off on the number of events they can hold?
No, we expect that there will be a covenant on title that will deal with the geotechnical requirements and the hazard requirements. And if there's something in the assessment that comes out that limits the number of events that could be also applied. So it's really driven by the hazard conditions on site.
Great.
Question or comment? Councillor?
Comment, the past questions, right?
Yeah.
So I am going to support this as well, and I agree with staff's approach in this. I think first reading is appropriate at this point as opposed to first and second. This is one of those instances where, because there's been a TEP in place for the last year or two, we've had a chance to see what the zoning would look like before we actually zone it. So it seems to work that way and gives the community a bit of a heads up what's coming forward. So I will be supporting this.
Thanks. I can support this as well. I'm just curious though, you spoke of the raised platforms on the site. I'm looking at it on the GIS. You say they'd be used as a safe haven in case of flooding, etc. What's the dimensions of those raised platforms? I can't really get a handle on it by looking at the GIS here. Just wondering how many people could actually be on those raised platforms if there were an incident.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, in the last quantitative risk assessment, I believe it was up to 800 people could be accommodated on site, provided that the map was shown with a safe evacuation route afterwards. That's going to get further ironed out in the forthcoming quantitative risk assessment.
Thank you.
Any more comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is item 8B1, which is District of Squamish 3rd Avenue Road Closure Bylaw, number 259 for 2018. Whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nav Gill, and this is Neil Plum from Real Estate Services. We're here to obtain first three readings to support the for a road closure bylaw to support the under one roof project. A few months ago, Council passed a motion for the district to execute a lease agreement with the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation for the project, subject to a few conditions. One of these conditions was a road closure and consolidation with 37871 3rd Avenue. The road closure area is highlighted in yellow on the map shown up here. It's 289.9 square meters, and there's no utilities in the area that are impacted by the closure. As such, staff is seeking first readings for 3rd Avenue road closure bylaw. If readings are obtained today, we will be issuing statutory notices prior to adoption. Over to you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. I love how she says over to you. Council, any questions for staff? Question, Councilor Pryor?
Why wouldn't you close it all the way out into the pond?
Through you, Mayor, we reviewed that and there was really no need to, so we just closed the portion that we needed to.
For the lease.
For the lease area.
Questions, Councilor Reyes?
Yeah, when we dealt with the zoning, was that portion zoned? Did we rezone that portion, or do we now have to come back and rezone that as well?
Through you, Mayor, that area was included in the rezoning
Was included in
area.
the zoning.
Councilor Elliott, you want to
I'll
move
move
it?
the motion.
I'll second that. Councilor Elliott, do you want to speak to the motion?
Giddy up, let's just get this built.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to 8C1, we have first up District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2020-21 consideration of third reading of OCP implementation priorities 2620. Council, we just had a public hearing on this and a report, so I'm not sure we need to redress that, but if there's someone who'd like to move it or second it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I just have staff outline what each one is covering? Just, not in detail, but like this is the one about RS1 or this is the one about...
Yeah, this isn't the one about RS1.
I know that.
Let me just go here, third reading. So,
yeah, that would be great, just to outline specifically which ones in front of
yeah, so 2620 is the fairly comprehensive bylaw that has the university minor amendments and a multitude of items. 2626 is the amendment that would add 2-unit dwellings to RS1. Oh, do you want all four? Those are the two that are up for third reading, are those two?
Yeah, that's fine.
But the 2626 doesn't have the adding triplexes to RS2.
No, that is within the 2620, the broad. The reason we had 2626 as a separate bylaw with the RS2 adding to the single, the RS1 zone, or the 2-unit going to the RS1 zone is because staff was not confident that this was something that staff and council and community were interested in, with some uncertainty, so we wanted to present it as an option to be considered.
Exactly, thank you. So, any more questions about all of them? Would someone like to move to yes?
If I can just get that clarified then, because the one we're on is C1, 7C1, 8C1, I beg your pardon. And did you just say that was the one that was RS1 to RS2?
No, I've got a good little...
That's the next one.
That's number 2.
This is what's in 2620. That is the C1. The first one to consider is got all of these elements.
That's what I thought. So I thought I misheard you.
2626, the next item, item 2, is the adding 2 units.
I'm going to move 2620, and it can seconded. Seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Absolutely support all of these aspects in 2620. There's some cleanup in there. There's some more policy around housing that I think is necessary, so I'm happy to support this. Anyone else like to speak to it? I'll call the question. Councillor Clare?
I'm really happy that we're addressing all these issues, and I'm glad that staff stepped up on this one.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next one is the RS1 2-unit dwelling. And I suspect council is going to have a bit of a challenge with this one. Is there anyone who would like to move it? Moved by Councillor Black and Wolf. Is there a seconder? Seeing no seconder. For a process point of view, if council wishes it not to continue, would it be better to second it and defeat it? I will second it for that purpose or for that deliberation. On the motion, I'll go Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Pratt.
Thanks. I think I stated my reasons why I can't support this. I think anything that adds density needs to come with community amenity contributions. Increasing the amount of density in our community costs money. And adding, from what I've seen, density does not make affordability. And I know that's it's an academic argument that you can have smaller units, but with our step code also increasing, the cost of building is actually increased to between 300 and 350 a square foot with new step code. So we're actually increasing the price of housing, and it's already unaffordable. So making more units that are going to just split the same cost of a single family home, where a single family home can actually be densified on its own. And I prefer to focus right now on having more affordable rentals be allowed in single family houses and densifying single family house lots without knocking down perfectly good stock in order to build high density and sell off a portion, which would make it more expensive, not less expensive, and the community amenity contributions.
Thank you. I was remiss. I usually go to the mover to speak first to the motion that they moved.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think people need to really take a closer look, though, at what's being proposed here. I know that when we approach a change that affects a large number of neighborhoods in the community, that rightfully so, there's some concern that arises. However, I would submit that this is probably one of the best ways that we can accommodate growth in our community in the very least disruptive fashion. And the reason I say that is I reflect upon the fact of, if you look at Brackendale, I know it was mentioned a bit earlier, I live in Brackendale and lived there for most of my time in Squamish, and I actually find that the neighborhood works quite well. It has quite a big diversity of ages of housing, types of housing. It's not all duplexes. There's single family homes, there's duplexes, there's homes with carriage homes, there's homes with suites. Never had trouble parking. certainly, yes, there are probably some Airbnb stuff going on. I would see some out of province plates and things like that. But overall, people are pretty respectful, and in these types of zoning situations, it is incumbent on the homeowner to make sure that they are going to have the on-site parking for both the units if they're going to have a duplex. Also worth remembering too that this type of development doesn't require mega developers with mega millions of dollars to get started. These are little projects that individual homeowners can do over time and won't change the character of a neighborhood in a very, very large way, and can accommodate family growth. You know, some people, they may want to have their children be able to grow up in the same town or raise their family in the same town that they grew up in, and having a duplex is one way to do that. So I'm actually not afraid of that. I don't think that it taxes our existing infrastructure that much beyond what would be paid for by development cost charges. So you know, I think it's a little bit unfortunate that we're not trying to offer something different in Squamish, because the alternative is more of the same of what we're seeing is neighborhoods being consolidated by big developers and condo projects and towers and things like that, or tearing up the forest. So, you know, I ask my colleagues to reconsider, but those would be my reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Pryor, Councillor Rayson, and Councillor Tobe.
Thank you. I'm not going to support this. I think this bylaw is a bit of a blunt instrument for what we're trying to achieve, and I think the silence to me is telling. I think if more people knew what we were doing, there would be way more people here. So I'm a little bit concerned that this kind of slid under the radar for such a broad-ranging impact. I think for me, where I'd love to see this applied is along our transit routes and adding that. So just a bit more of a nuanced approach to doing it rather than just blanket. And I think that it should be aligned with our neighborhood planning as we go. I think this is to Councillor Blackman-Wall's point, a really great way to achieve greater density without needing to have large developers involved. But I'm not supportive of just applying it everywhere.
Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, thanks. When we were discussing this in committee meetings, I really like this idea. And I like the fact that it opened up different types of housing and cluster housing, I mean, all sorts of really cool stuff. And totally on board with it. But after hearing that lady speak, I now like, I like what Jason says, but along Karen's lines, I'd like to see it near our transportation hubs, near our store hubs, and on our main bus routes for a start. And then as the neighborhood plans kick off, we can see what the neighborhoods themselves want. So I would rather this come back for us to discuss it again rather than lose it. But, you know, as I think we do need to tweak it a little bit.
Councillor Rayson.
Thank you. Like my other councillors, I have concerns about this, and was probably one that voted for it at the committee to bring it to this point. But on reflecting, I think it is one of these things that might lead us to some unintended consequences in individual applications. I think I generally agree with the principle. I generally agree with the thought that there's a lot of land in this municipality that we can make more efficient use of. And something along these lines I think is appropriate. I would prefer to see it done after our sub-area plans on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. And that allows for local consultation. It allows us to point to some areas where this might be appropriate and some areas where it might not be appropriate. I happen to live on Tobermory like Mr. Bennett, and that street now is completely built out. The last lot built a couple of years ago. I once looked into the economics in another property of tearing down a single family home to build a duplex in accordance with the zoning. And that's a pretty marginal proposition when you're getting rid of an existing house. So I'm not too worried, if this was in place of somebody coming through our neighborhood and houses being torn down. It's more, I think, applicable in the short term at least to infill vacant lots, etc. But still, I think there is an argument for the neighborhoods to chime in this. And so I would certainly entertain this after a sub-area plan based on consultation, based on a more site-specific view of it, or smaller area-specific view of it, rather than go at it this way. So I will not be supporting this application.
Councillor Kent.
Yes, I agree. I can't support it either. I think it still needs some refining. It has a feeling of a blanket solution. I think due to also raising property values artificially, but what really concerns me is the loss of the community amenity contributions by the upzoning, which would be applied to better use, so I can't support it.
Yeah, I generally agree with everything Councillor Blackman-Wolf has said, but I do think a more nuanced approach should be taken. And I suspect there's some unintended consequences that would come out of this type of sort of broad-based policy. So I think it's something future council should contemplate and work on and fine-tune. But the intention, I agree, is good. I also don't think you'd see dramatic change in neighborhoods right away. Brackendale has been zoned duplex for 20 years, and it still has predominantly single-family homes. So I think there's a bit of a fear that all of a sudden everyone would rip down their house and build duplexes. I don't think that's reality, but I do think it requires a little more thought and a little more nuance in terms of how it gets implemented in a strategic way. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Kent, Elliott, Pryor, Race, opposed Chappelle, Green Heights, and opposed. Motion fails. Moving on to item 8C3, consideration of third reading for Official Clean Hand Bylaw number 2500-2017, Amendment Bylaw Garibaldi Springs number 2613-2018. Staff, is there anything you'd like to present prior to council's deliberation?
Yes, we have a short presentation, just following up on the public hearing and some of the conditions for adoption.
Thank you.
And with me today is Susan Stratus, our planner on file.
Excuse me, just getting more up to date. I'll have to do it from a second here.
Can we take a 2-minute recess?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be
We're in
great.
recess. Thank you. We're back in our regular business meeting of September 18th, and we are on item 8C. If I could ask everyone to take a seat and to allow the meeting to proceed. We are on item 8C3. Susan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Susan Stratus. I'm the planner working with the district on this development application. I have a very brief presentation, unlike my previous ones. We're bringing forward the OCP Amendment Bylaw number 2613 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2614 for third reading. And the purpose tonight is to bring forward the report to Council that reports on the public hearing in accordance with the Local Government Act requirements. Just very briefly, the background, the application started in 2016 and went into 2017. Through early 2018, the original application was given first and second reading on January 8th. March 9th, was given second reading. April 24th, the previous application was given public hearing, and on May 8th, the bylaws were defeated at third reading. The new application came in on May 22nd, public information meeting held on June 25th, first and second reading on July 3rd, and the public hearing held on September 6th. So I won't read through these bylaws, these are just for reference, but the OCP amendment bylaw designates the 4 parcels in blue as residential neighborhood and retains the remainder as greenway corridors and recreation, roughly 78% of the site. And the zoning amendment bylaw, again, designates zones, the RM4 blue parcels as RM4 to allow for a mix of housing, a new P4 zone, ecological reserve for the green areas, and the P3 zone would apply to the small park areas, which are the more active use areas. So through the public hearing, and this is really just a very brief generalization of the public comments that were received in support, and I just want to acknowledge that we're kind of compressing several hours of input. The comments in support were that the project provides a good mix of housing types, including affordable housing, and provides it in areas outside the downtown, provides community amenities, daycare, trails, and park that will be used by the community. The project provides a large green space and public ownership that is an asset to the community and the environment. The riparian areas meet district environment guidelines for streams. Streams are protected and resurrected. The project provides an opportunity to remediate the site from the previous golf course alterations. The comments were also that the developer has a good track record to complete complex projects. The trails and event spaces are considered to be an economic driver, and the trails and green space provide access that does not currently exist, so it is a positive contribution to the community. The public comments opposed to the project, again, very compressed. The application came in too soon after the previous denial and potentially violates district procedures. The previous public input was not respected. Residents are tired out from making comments. There is a large inventory of development projects underway, and other areas should be infilled first. Comments were made that major decisions such as this should wait for a new council. The new OCP has just recently been adopted and therefore should not be changed. On habitat issues, a number of concerns. First, with the emergency access road potentially requiring infill of the pond. The aesthetic ponds do not provide habitat, do provide habitat. The wetlands are precious and should not be developed, especially at the south end. Some comments were received that there are no specific recommendations in the bioinventory report for critical habitat protection and provincial guidelines potentially not being met. Comments were received that it's up to the district to enforce environmental protection and that some of the senior agencies are potentially not at the table. Comments were made about parking on Tantalus and overall traffic issues on Tantalus that will be made worse. CACs are too low as proposed, and maintenance costs for the habitat areas will be passed on to taxpayers. Development needs to be coordinated with lands to the east, and retaining walls and loss of trees at the north end. So it's a very quick summary. We did in the council report make a list of the council questions that were raised at the public hearing, and I did want to mention a clarification. In the report to council at the public hearing, we mentioned that the land development agreement is still being prepared and revised in discussions with the applicants. The report at the public hearing said that it was intended to be registered with the development permit, and in fact it is intended to be registered concurrently with the first plan of subdivision, which is when the land would, the ecological reserve would transfer to the district. And that would do two things. It would ensure the ecological reserve is maintained for conservation purposes in perpetuity, and secondly, ensure that any extensions to municipal infrastructure, if and when needed, require the oversight and approval of the third-party conservation organization. So the next steps, and this is subject to Council's direction tonight, these are potential next steps if the project were to move forward, would be third reading of the bylaws, finalize and execute the land development agreement, followed by bylaw adoption of both bylaws. We would then need to complete the covenant with a third-party conservation organization, as just described. The subdivision application would be the forum for dedicating the public land. The environmental DP would be required as a part of that subdivision application, and a site alteration permit would be required with respect to any alteration on the property. All of those would need to be completed before the Phase 1 development permit for the Phase 1 project could be submitted. So those are the general sequence of steps. And I should mention that as part of the environmental DP, the provincial and federal agency authorizations and approvals would be required. So that is the end of my presentation. I do have the maps from the public hearing should council need to look at any of those.
Questions for staff? Councillor Elliott?
There was something in your presentation, Susan, about the third-party agreement. And I thought at public hearing, I asked the question about whether the third party would need to agree to the Newport Road extension. And you said that would be exempt, but this makes it read like that would be covered.
Do you want to address that, Jonas?
That is correct. So that is something that came up by council members and by the public at the public hearing. And what we're proposing is to include oversight and approval of any extension by this third party. So that would be secured in the land development agreement.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarification from staff at this point? Yeah.
Is there, thank you. Is there an RFP going out for the ecological reserve? Will that be managed by the district or by the developer?
RFP for the third-party covenant or RFP for the management of the...
For the management of the ecological reserve.
So the applicant and the current landowner will be required to do all of the improvements to the ecological reserve. And then once it's dedicated, it will be given over to the district for long-term operation.
And through the mayor, if I could just clarify that, the ecological reserve improvements that are authorized by provincial and federal agencies are the applicant's responsibility for the first 5 years, that the district would be responsible for the remainder of the park and trail areas.
So the oversight is going to be from the applicant. It will be, it's supposed to be the authorities, but we don't have any authorities, so.
No, through the mayor, the authorities are very much in the picture. The provincial Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resources and Rural Development, I believe it's called, FLNROD, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans are both very much requirements for any of the work that is proposed, and that is still very much a requirement. The district does have its development permit conditions, but those other agencies are responsible for any on-the-ground authorizations.
Just to clarify, they oversaw the development of the golf course, is that correct?
As far as I know, yes, that would be the case.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Council Clark?
Could you go back to the list of reasons why not to do it? I was just thinking about the one that talks about other infill. Where's that?
The third bullet point?
There's a large inventory of development projects infill at other areas first.
Do any of the other large inventory infill developments propose a 75% park?
No.
And then we're just talking about the environmental protection. So when this project, and if this project goes forward, the builder is the one that's responsible for building all that, right?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. The terms of the land development agreement are that the developer and the commitment they have made is that they would upfront complete all of the environmental protection works and the park construction upfront as part of the first phase of development.
Can you flip back to the other the reasons why to do it, please?
Do you have a slide for comments and support?
This is it here.
Sorry.
Yeah. And it's, you know, this whole, you know, one, it says, leave this till the next council. And so, you know, we've been working on this for 2 years. And we're going to have a new council in shortly that, you know, if you look
Councillor
at...
Pryor, we just have questions. We can articulate a point of view once we're debating the motion on the floor.
She does that too.
You do it every time, Ted.
Anyway.
I think that speaks for you.
Yeah. Anyway, board meetings. Now you made me lose track. It was on the, talk about the developer has a good track record of completing complex projects. So, I guess that's a fact, right?
I'm not sure it's fair for staff to, these are comments from the public, and I'm not sure it's fair for staff to.
Okay, well, I'll wait until the end.
Yeah. I appreciate your efforts to form a question. Any more questions from council? I don't see any. There is a possible motion in front of us. Is there anyone who would like to move it? Moved by Councillor Pryor. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Louise. Councillor Pryor, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to the lists, and it has been a long protest, yeah.
I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, but just to let everyone know how I feel about it, and a lot of these things you have to go by feel. There's a lot of people, obviously, that aren't happy with this, and I've got to say I'm really unhappy to what I'm seeing online. Some of the stuff that's been said on there is not good. But to this project, I read the list of not support, and I go through and it's like, you know, like some of them are semi-legitimate, like leave it for the next council. I go, we're going to have another council in here with 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 new people, and just to let you folks know out there that you don't just walk into this seat and start making things happen. You know, we've got a fairly seasoned group up here, and this is coming at the end of our term. So I don't know, when I see leave it to the next council, I see it's dead in the water. It's dead in the water. So I just eliminate that right away. But when I go to the page that shows all the good things that it does, which you guys can put up there, I start going, yes, large green space public ownership. Okay. Riparian areas, meat district, environmental stream protection, and okay, so that means they're getting fixed up. It doesn't mean we're taking anything out. You know, 75% owned by the community. The developer has a good track record of completing complex projects. I know that. I know that this development group is stellar, and they've built some beautiful buildings. I have no doubt. So we're up at UBCM, Sue, and I, on the week and we go for walks. During the day, we went for walks through the trail system in Whistler. And Sue and I are both commenting how beautiful they are, and look at those trails, crossing the little bridges and streams. And I said to Sue, that's what this project's going to bring us, just these exact trails. Which she couldn't really answer for a minute or so. But, so, anyway, I mean, you know how I feel about it. I do think that 20 years from now or 10 years from now, the community will be enjoying this area, and this meeting and these meetings will all be history. We won't even be talking about this. It'll be something else. And we'll have made the right decision in allowing this to go forward now.
Councillor Chanel. This should be fun.
You know, I'll go back to Patty's comment that rivers are the lifeblood and integral to the district. That she said at the beginning of this when we supported Rivers Day. And yeah, we walked around golf course. It was a fully working golf course. And it was permeable surfaces. And if somebody said, hey, we're going to fill in half of Lost Lake and build 310 townhomes on it, but you'll be able to walk around it, I would say no. And, you know, there are no community amenities in this that I find valuable for my community. All I see is 310 townhomes. And as far as environmental, you can't just take a habitat and fill it in and replace it over here. I find the idea of riparian habitat being compensated by just removing one area over here and filling it in over here as something that really goes against our community values. Our community appreciates its green space. And to say that we're filling in a pond that's a full microbiome habitat that has grown and evolved and remediated itself already, all by itself, and then say, oh, we're just going to throw a road in, but we'll flood over here and make it riparian over here. And yes, it'll be planted and it'll take ages to come back. And also, the issue of trails is a separate issue to me. Access to this property was, we had access to it as a paid golf course. We were able to walk on it. And it is a privately owned, I respect that it's a privately owned area, but I also feel that humans don't have to be in every ecological habitat, that it's not our right to have access and paved trails through every ecological habitat in our district. Maybe one day we'll come to a place where we need to rezone green space in order to preserve housing and make habitat for humans because we've run out of space and there's no more space. But I actually find that there's more brownfields and other areas that we could probably develop as a part of, like up top, away from ecologically sensitive areas, away from climate sensitive areas, away from areas that have species at risk. And the species at risk is a really critical piece of this land. It's not a piece of land that is just, you know, it's been wrecked by a golf course and apparently oversaw, you know, it had oversight. And that oversight wasn't respected. And I don't trust that a developer and the fisheries that has left our district, we don't have any fisheries in our district anymore. Fisheries and oceans have moved to Steveston and the oversight isn't going to be as we expect. I'd almost rather see smaller areas of this lot densified, maybe A densified, and then B densified, do the restoration of the ecological habitat, leave C and D. There's different ways that we can manage this. The whole idea of rezoning and developing this entire space all at once without holding anything back and just expecting that it's all going to go well, just like we did with the golf course, seems unreasonable to me. It seems like, you know, we're just, that, you know, being told that we have to rezone the entire area or we won't get anything. We already have something. We have ecological habitat for species at risk. We have rivers and permeable surface that flows down, that protects our upper regions and allows water to flow down and actually be absorbed into the ground. And what we'd be doing is we'd be building and cementing on areas that are currently ecological habitat. And yes, we have some trails to go through, but we don't have a dearth of trails in our district. We have access to the most beautiful trails, like 700 kilometers of trails in our district. And yes, connected, if this developer wanted to, they could say, yes, we can connect the trails. Go ahead, Trail Society. We can, put in that money, and maybe we could give 150 grand since we're going to be paying that money anyways, and do some remediation. So the idea of remediation and trails and access is different to me than the idea of needing to build 310 townhomes in this area that's incredibly ecologically sensitive. So having event space and 12 daycare spaces, we just zoned event space. Today it's not in the same area, but we have event space.
We did not zone event space.
We didn't zone, we went to first reading, but we're looking forward to having event space. Regardless, it's a different issue, but when you're rezoning these sensitive areas, if you don't hold something back and make sure that it's done right in the first place, and I'm not saying that this can never be developed, I'm saying that when it's developed, the oversight has to be incredibly careful in order to preserve what this area has been. And it's just 5 fish-bearing streams and ponds and habitat that has grown and remediated itself and started doing building itself back to what it was. I think I've said everything I need to say.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. I'll keep it a little bit more concise. The list of comments opposed speaks to my stance. I will stand by the comments that I've made on this project all along. I cannot support it, but I will say that I respect the opinions and the integrity of my cohort.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, deal with some of the concerns. I went through my notes of the public hearing today just to kind of refresh my memory. It was a couple of weeks ago, and there's several concerns expressed, and one of them was around process, and I just want to talk about that briefly. And the concern was that this came back too soon and should have been a 6-month wait. If there was a problem with that, and I actually don't think there was, I think this is a significantly different project, but if there was a problem with that, that is the district. That is not the proponent. The district controls the process. And so when I think about that, I don't let those concerns change my, change my perception or judgment of the development on its merits. Second was with respect to the proximity of the housing at the north end. And in the evolution of this proposal, the initial proposal had significantly more housing at the north end than is presently in this proposal. As it evolved, it was pulled back from the west end. There's a portion of that north end that is actually, and I think you see it in yellow there, is actually already zoned and could have 3-story housing on it. The developer has reduced that to 1-story, which accommodates the people that are in behind on Dowett Drive. So significant concessions and the density reduced there. There's still work to do there. There was discussions about landscaping and so forth that I think will still be addressed in the development permit stage. But I think most of those issues, from my perspective, have been addressed. There was a concern about traffic on Newport Drive because Newport Drive would be the significant access to the southern development. Newport Drive was originally designed as a connector right up to the Highlands. It is designed to be through traffic, and for that reason it's a wider road and there are no driveways onto Newport Drive. So this is consistent with its original purpose, although it's not the same location. Probably less traffic from this than there would be if it was a connector to the Highlands. The other is why develop and all of the discussions around green space. For me, a rezoning must have a benefit to the community. I think that's true for almost any rezoning. And in some places, it's relatively straightforward. It's just more efficient use of the land. And when I'm considering rezonings, I consider that benefit. This also entails an OCP amendment. And so for me, at least, that's a slightly higher threshold. But the OCP changes. We just had another motion earlier this evening that amended the OCP. It's a living document. I'm not sure it was actually part of the OCP review. It was taken out because it was a zoning application, but nevertheless, it is presently in the OCP as green space. This will involve an amendment to it. Some people have suggested that because it's green space, it should never change. That's just not what an OCP is. But for me, the threshold is then what is the benefit to the community? It's just a higher benefit. There is a significant benefit here from my perspective, and that's the opportunity to secure and improve critical habitat. I know there's discussion around other amenities such as an active park and daycare and so forth, but I'm really not focusing on that. For me, the thing that makes this development worthwhile is the benefit of establishing and maintaining and improving critical habitat. These are private lands. I think people sometimes forget that. They think of them as just their own lawn. They're not by a long shot. They are private lands, and a lot of other things could happen with these lands. And so when something comes along, it's an opportunity for the community, and you decide it is an opportunity for the community and a benefit to the community, that for me justifies amending the OCP and the rezoning that follows that. This rezoning will mitigate some measures that were put there originally by the golf course construction. We've all heard the problems with that. The golf course is not green space in my mind. It is developed land. It's almost a brownfield. And as I said once before, if you've ever seen a golf course under construction with the heavy machinery that's involved, the additional materials not native to the area, the compacting and so forth, and all the maintenance that comes after that, it is not green space. It'd be the same as paving a parking lot and painting it green and calling that green space. It's not much different. But there is a significant amount of green space there that is not fairways, that is riparian areas, that is adjacent to critical habitat, and that's the part we're going to preserve. And it comes to over 78% of the site would go into a conservation area. That's quite significant. And a significant amount of the site, over 80%, will become public. This is not a dense development. It is really quite spread out, considering what it could be. And so for these reasons, I will be supporting this. And my comments are directed to the first motion, which I think is to amend the OCP, and also to the second motion, which is to amend the zoning.
Thank you. Councillor Black-and-Wolf.
I find it very disappointing that unfortunately a majority of council doesn't seem to have a backbone to stand up against a developer in this situation. I think that what's happened here is a developer has made a very speculative, risky investment, and now we're being asked to clean up the mess. And I think that that's a very unfair position to be putting the district in. However, at the end of the day, we still have the decision making in this particular instance. And when I look at this project, what I think of is I think of all of the damage that's already been done in this area and that's continuing to be done in this area. And every other developer that comes along says, oh, well, we'll fix it. We'll make it better. Oh, we'll compensate here. We'll compensate there. Well, you know what? After this, there'll be another one. There'll be another one. They'll come by. They'll say, oh, you know what? They kind of messed up on this. And, oh, we can't really afford the infrastructure that's in here. It's not dense enough. There's not enough residents to support this. And guess what? I'm going to be carving out more of that green space and carving more. And then there'll be pretty much nothing left. I think it's unfortunate because I do really feel that in this particular part of our community, this is the marquee green space that is very different in terms of its character, its topography, its water courses, than pretty much all of the land surrounding it, including the undeveloped land further up in the benchlands. And I think that we're missing out on a generational opportunity to create a legacy for our community that will be long-term. Somewhere along the order of Stanley Park. I mean, think about what Stanley Park would have been like if they tried to do that now. Condo developers would come and say, oh, well, you know, the military had it for 10 years and, oh, they made a mess of it. But you know what? We're going to fix it. But in exchange for that, we're going to need to put up some condos. well, how would Stanley Park look then? Would it really be the gem that we feel that it is today? I suggest not. And I suggest that this particular rezoning, not only is it bad from the point of view of an ecological concerns, it's going to be a boondoggle fiscally and in terms of the infrastructure. It's a disaster to leave to a future community, and I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks. Interesting that Councillor Kent talks about integrity and then someone speaks and talks about people having no backbone. Anyway, that's a learning moment for all the aspiring councillors out there. You could focus on people or you could just focus on policy. So I'm going to focus on policy. I don't think that a marquee piece of land is one that could be sold to an offshore developer and have a fence put around it and cut off access to our community. That to me is not a legacy. I think that this OCP amendment makes sense to me because it is being zoned eventually to P4, which is a reserve and not just a park. Because there is a third-party signatory on it, that makes it very difficult for future councillors to densify this land any further. This is a gift to the community in perpetuity and puts it back into public hands, which is exactly where it should be. I think that it was unfortunate that this land was disturbed in the first place to make it a golf course. And I think we have the opportunity, based on the reports that I've read, to speed up the natural process and enhance the recovery process. I do believe in the environmental oversight that DFO and the Ministry of the Environment can provide. I also know we have very active community groups that would like to be involved in this restoration work, so I don't believe that it will falter. I do think there are benefits to the community, certainly in the corridor trail extension, the daycare, the economic development certainty for the hotel, the parks, the trails throughout, and keeping this, these watersheds intact and putting this back into public lands, I think, speak to the benefits of the community. I think it creates certainty for the neighborhood over the long term and creates a wonderful new place for people to enjoy nature without having to leave the boundaries of the District of Squamish. It'll be accessible. It provides a haven in what will become a more densely populated part of our community. I'm pleased to see that the LDA won't exclude Newport Road extension from the third-party agreement. I would have had a problem with the land development agreement if that had stayed in there. So I'm happy to support both this one, and my comments will refer to the bylaw as well on the zoning.
Thank you, everyone. As you know, this has been a very challenging application for council, for staff. It's come a long way from the original proposal, a long way. I think the original proposal had over 750 units. That evolution is necessary on a piece of land this complicated and this important to this neighborhood. As you know, I opposed the previous application. I thought it, particularly what was then called Phase C, was an area that we should not be developing in. It's the sort of the recharge area for Meehan Creek. And I think Meehan Creek is, as Councillor Chappelle says, it's a foundational river system, salmon-bearing stream. The golf course development severely compromised all the waterways in that area pretty much. It would take 200 years for nature to rehabilitate those lands to what they probably should have remained in the beginning. The overall net habitat gain is significant now. The ponds, one pond is being filled and one is partially being filled. Those ponds were actually a detriment to the fish-bearing streams in the area, and actually producing waters that were too hot for good riparian salmon habitat. This is a dramatically different proposal. The last proposal was not supportable in my mind. The Newport Ridge Drive has been an issue for me from the beginning as an extension up to the Highlands. When there was an application from the council 7-8 years ago, I rejected it because of its intent was to simply gain access for the uplands through the Newport Ridge Road extension. So I too am very pleased to see that it's not being recommended that it be excluded from the covenant process for the habitat. As it stands now, I think this is a supportable project. I think someone said something in the public meeting about, Mayor Heinzman, do you want this to be your legacy? And I certainly hope after 13 years this isn't the only thing that people reflect on or that I reflect on. However, I think this is actually a legacy project for the community. This is 78% of land going to habitat restoration and public use. And actually, it's more like 86% is actually becoming public use through the roads and parks, neighborhood parks. That is a significant gain for the community. And overall, the net gain in habitat, and ironically, I think people supporting this project are doing it for environmental reasons, and people who are against this project are doing it for environmental reasons. I think that's the irony of all this. But I truly believe that this is a net gain environmentally, and I can therefore support this. I would not be able to support it if it was essentially paving the way for the extension of Newport Ridge Road up into Benchlands, and that's been one of my main issues from the beginning. I actually think this will help Newport Ridge Road reduce some of the traffic that they're concerned about, but fundamentally I don't believe a road should be going over Mean Creek today or in the future. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to point out some fallacies that have been stated, that by, this cognitive dissonance, that by building townhouses in an area, it's preserving it as an ecological reserve, and that the fact that we can remediate, we can dig out fish ponds, we can make more ecological habitat in this area. We're being asked to, pay money, 150 grand a year in order to, that goes a long way. Plus, I look at what happened to the estuary. When the estuary was taken over by the public, or taken over by the province, and remediated by Mrs. Tobe also did a remediation in there and dug out the fish channels, did an amazing job. That is separate from building townhouses. The fact that this land can be remediated and put into ecological reserve is separate from building townhouses. And there are ways to do that. They can involve provincial grants, it can involve, there's a lot of different ways, and I just think that by negotiating, we sent this away last time, and look at the benefits that we received. I think that there's still things left on the table. I don't think that we have to give away A, B, C, and D for 12 daycare spaces and the promise of land given back to the public. I think that the difference of putting in some trails for, or that even, I'm skeptical that adding humans to the area is a good thing for this habitat. That by riding our bikes through the habitat, it's going to preserve it. Or by putting 310 more families in this area, that it's going to be better for the habitat. I find those things completely separate, like building an environment that is ecologically sensitive and that we must build on the habitat in order to preserve the habitat are two things I can't reconcile. But I think that there's still things left on the table. I think this can be a better project. I think that we could get more community amenities out of it for our public. I find that people that have to drive past our fire hall and look at it out on sticks, it's a, earthquake hazard where public isn't allowed because the buildings, it's possible that the building could cave in. That's like to drive past that and accept 12 daycare spaces for this and then be given back land that has been preserved in our OCP as green space and habitat and golf course, of course, but still permeable surface. And yes, it was wrecked and not overseen by fisheries, which is the other point. Leaving it in the hands of the province and the feds that are not overseeing these projects is not a good idea at this time. And as I said, I don't feel like I'm being unreasonable by saying, as a district, that we have to hold some things back in order to make sure that things are done correctly. Because clearly, everybody's pointing to the golf course, the same people oversaw it last time. And now we're pointing to the ecological disaster that it is, that it needs remediation. It really doesn't need, walking through that area now, it doesn't need remediation. It's doing its job, just like the estuary was doing its job and would do its job. And with a little help and a little funding, we could make this area an incredible area for the public. And with partnering with the developers who are telling us that they have to build 310 and use it and fill in ponds and make exit roads. But C&D, that those ponds warm fish habitat. I don't think that cementing it and adding housing actually is good for fish habitat either. So yeah, that differential of like, we have to do this in order to get this, that there are things that have to be left on the table to ensure land develops correctly in this district, and land is our only scarce resource right now.
Councillor Blackwell.
Yes, yeah, and I'd certainly like to apologize to anyone around the council table who may have been offended by my remarks. And politics is a tough business, and you've got to develop a thick skin if you're going to run for mayor. It's a really good idea. But anyway, I just wanted to say that one of the things that was not mentioned a little bit earlier was the fact that we just revised our official community plan. We keep forgetting that, and I find it very distressing that there are people on this council who champion that plan, who are now voting against that plan. And I think it sends the very wrong message to our people. It sends the wrong message to developers. It says that, hey, come to Squamish, you can do whatever you want, we're not that picky. Have at it, And I don't think it has to be that way. Squamish has the opportunity, there's a lot of interest in our community, there's a lot of growth in our community, and there will continue to be. So let's make it do the growth right for our community, right for our residents, and the way we can do that is by rejecting applications like this one.
Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, thanks. Over the last 7 years, I've sat through hundreds of discussions with council like this. And I know it's always hard when you're on the wrong side. And I'd like to thank Mayor Heisman for letting everyone go on and restate their opinion. In the heat of the moment, lots of times things are said that are not necessarily the truth. I've heard lots of people talking about environment, but everything I read in that environment studies, and by the qualified environmental people, don't say what I'm hearing. So, but I know it's hard being on the wrong side of a vote, so that's not me.
I'm not sure it's the wrong
It's
side.
them.
I wouldn't articulate it as the wrong side. It's just a different side. I want to speak, Councillor Chappelle brought up the fire hall, and I feel it necessary to clarify things. The fire hall has the exoskeleton that's there to make it seismically stable. It's probably safer today than it was the day it was built. I just wanted to clarify that. Is that fair enough, Mr. Buxton?
And the public can go into that building. It's perfectly safe for our staff and the public to be in that building.
Thank you.
The yellow signs that say no public allowed, right? That's... it's number 2 now, which is yellow, which is no public allowed, the firefighters allowed it.
Come on that.
Yeah, I just...
Yeah, but I want to add to that because I know there's been a lot of talk about that fire hall and Well, a lot of work's been going on in that in the last 3 years. It's not like everyone's been sitting on there.
I didn't mean to distract.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify some statements that were made. I think council's had ample opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kent, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Blackman, both opposed. Motion carries. The subsequent zoning bylaws in front of council, I'm going to suggest that we've made all our peace with this and we don't need any further comments. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Elliott. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I'm Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Blackman Wolf, and Councillor Kent opposed. Motion carries. I thought count stuff. We can figure that one out. So just from a process point of view, the land development agreement will come back to council.
That's correct.
Moving on to third reading and consideration of adoption of OCP Quest Neighborhood Park number 2624-2018. Is there someone who would like to move third reading, and we have to do third reading first and adoption separate, or one motion? One motion? Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Pryor. I'll second that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. And District Squamish zoning bylaw 2020-2011 amendment bylaw Quest single and two-unit dwelling number 2625. Council can consider third reading and adoption. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Blackman Wolf. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. We are on to 9A1, development permit number 467. Would council like to have a 5-minute break?
Okay.
No? Okay. Lydia? Development permit number 467-1002, industrial.
Evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. Tonight I'm presenting development permit number 467 located at 1002 Industrial Way. DP 467 is located at the corner of Industrial Way and Discovery Way. Directly south is the Tim Hortons and Wendy's drive-thru, as well as an auto shop. West is a parking lot, and north are 3 vehicle-oriented industrial buildings. To the east is a car wash and lube shop that is currently under construction. The property was formerly an Imperial Oil bulk station. The site has remained vacant since the buildings associated with the oil bulk station were demolished in 2012. The Ministry of the Environment issued a certificate of compliance with the site in 2016. This is the first development application on the property since the previous operations ceased. 1002 Industrial Way is zoned light industrial. The majority of adjacent lots are also zoned light industrial, while the lot located to the west is zoned CD16, accessory parking to a motel use. The property is within a flood hazard area and is bordered by a secondary floodway along its western and southern property lines. The above image shows the secondary floodway route in relation to the site. The property is subject to 2009 Official Community Plan Development Permit Area 5 Highway 99 corridor, which is established to regulate the form and character of commercial and industrial development along Highway 99. This DP application seeks to allow for the construction of 2 multi-bay industrial buildings and 1 accessory building for waste management. Building A's proposed floor area is 1,338 square meters, 14,403 square feet, while Building B's proposed floor area is 1,161 square meters, 12,505 square feet. Building A consists of 5 units, each approximately 168 square meters or 2,000 square feet, with bay access from the east. Each unit in Building A has a shared entry providing access to the unit and associated mezzanine next to each bay door, and a second entry from the west fronting Discovery Way. Building B consists of 6 units, each approximately 140 square meters or 1,500 square feet. Each unit in Building B has a shared entry providing access to the unit and associated mezzanine next to each bay door on the west side. Each unit in Building B has an exit to the east side that leads to a concrete path that provides access to the accessory garbage building and industrial way. The development is compliant with the I-1 zone. Access to the site is provided from Discovery Way in order to reduce potential congestion along the Industrial Way road. This site plan is displayed above. The main building materials are concrete tilt-up wall panels, pre-finished primed painted metal flashing, and painted metal channel and canopies. Treated plywood panels are proposed along most other elevations. The south elevation fronts Industrial Way. The west elevation of Building A is fronting Discovery Way. These are both shown on the slide. The slide shows the elevations of building A and B as seen from the parking area between the buildings. Composite panel and treated plywood around metal louvers are proposed along the east elevation of building B. Climbing vines will be planted on wire along this elevation to increase screening. Landscape plans propose a vegetated perimeter and includes a mix of deciduous trees, including dogwood, daywick beech, and tulip trees along the Discovery and Industrial Way frontages. The proponent is providing a 1.5 meter right-of-way on their frontage along Industrial Way to provide for a multi-use path that continues east along the neighboring property's frontage to Highway 99. Development Permit 467 was presented to the Advisory Design Panel on April 19th, 2018. ADP passed the following resolution: that the Advisory Design Panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the recommendations addressed in the April 19th, 2018 Advisory Design Panel meeting. Staff have worked with the applicant to resolve some of ADP's recommendations as highlighted in the table above. This include articulation of tilt-up panels, consider similar treatment of addressing the street as Building A for Building B, reconsider the access aisle to become a crosswalk which will allow extra space for unloading vehicles in the accessible stalls, provide a strong pedestrian connection between buildings without a loss to green space, consider benches and a wider pedestrian sidewalk along Discovery Wayside, which would incorporate plantings, and reduce ramp to closer to 5%. In summary, the proposal generally meets Development Permit Area 5 form and character guidelines. Highlights include the quality of building material, extensive landscaping and screening of garbage and other necessary features, and the dedicated multi-use path along the Industrial Way frontage. DP 467 project was posted on to the district's development showcase. No request for a public information meeting were received within a 21-day showcase timeframe. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize development permit number 467 for the property at 1002 Industrial Way, subject to the provision of bonding for landscaping work in the form of cash or certified check in the amount of $54,529.46, the registration of a flood covenant on title, and the registration of a 1.5 meter public access right-of-way for the multi-use path along the Industrial Way frontage. Staff alternatively recommends that Council not authorize development permit 467 and refer back to staff. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions about the DP? Council Raising, Council Park.
Thank you. Can you go to one of the overheads, please?
Sure.
So it just wasn't, the previous, oh, that one's fine. So that's Industrial Way along the bottom.
Yes.
So the access is through the top from the north. What's that across the front at the bottom to stop vehicles from going in off of Industrial Way?
Let me just pull up a different elevation here to show. So this south elevation here shows that it's actually a raised platform. There's a retaining wall along there with a railing, and that acts as a crosswalk consistent with the ADP's recommendation to have that next to the accessible parking stalls to allow for ease of unloading and loading of handicapped parking spaces and for pedestrian connectivity.
So crosses over something?
No,
It's elevated, so there's no way a car can get in there. Is that what you're asking, Councilor?
Well, I see that, it's a barricade, but I was just curious what the barricade was constructed of, and it's just to stop the traffic going in, but what was that part about the handicap crosswalk? Is it in behind that?
It is in behind this railing. There's a retaining wall along there. There's stairs up next to each. These are sets of stairs right here next to the railings, so those go up. And then this is a retaining wall along here. And if I go back to the site plan, that is the landscaping along here, and then this is the crosswalk area next to the accessible stalls.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Park?
Where's the railroad tracks?
Not even close to here.
Okay. I got this one mixed up with that.
This is right near the highway.
Oh, this is
Across from Triton. Council, any questions, Councilor Spell?
Yeah, it's a tilt-up cement build. It's these tilt-up buildings everywhere that I really fear losing airspace and employment space. These Was there any thought of adding height and employment to this area?
No, it meets the zoning. It's got a mezzanine
Yeah.
second floor office space, but that's it.
Okay, can I ask one more question? Just about,
Absolutely.
how about thought about public space for lunch and like a center space or a little tiny micro parks so that people could have lunch and some public space in there?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, there is benches provided in these areas here along this landscaped area. So there is some area for staff and pedestrians to kind of congregate and relax.
Thank you.
Tim Hortons across the street.
For the tunnel.
Any other questions on this development permit? Just a reminder, there aren't any variances, so the permit must be judged based on its meeting or not meeting the guidelines in the DP. Councillor Spell?
I'll move to
Moved by Councillor Spell, second by Councillor Kent. Councillor Spell, do you want to speak to it? You don't have to.
Yes, well, you know, it meets the zoning, and that's all. Our business park is going to be monolithic, and that's a really sad state of affairs because it's, you know, it could be so much more as far as employment density. I don't mind these buildings. A lot of small businesses have now located in these buildings. It definitely provides employment space, and it'd be interesting to see how these buildings fill up. We still have policy to work on to allow businesses to scale into these spaces and be allowed to actually grow into larger businesses in these areas.
Would anyone like to speak to the DP?
Yeah, this has sat dormant for quite a while. It's nice to see it in the adjacent lot to its right now with the car wash, et cetera, coming in and actually filling in some of the loft space that's in the business park. So I'm happy to see this and happy to support it.
Anyone else like to speak to it?
Yeah, with respect, I don't necessarily agree that the business park is becoming monolithic. I know there's a lot of tilt-up buildings, but they seem to all have variations, different coloring, and so forth. It happens to be a very efficient and relatively cost-effective form of building this, and if you force other forms of construction on it, all you're going to do is raise the cost of construction, which in turn ultimately translates to the businesses that are trying to live there. So I'm quite happy with this. I think the landscaping is nice. Happy to see that there's no exit or entrance off of Industrial Way, because I know in previous discussions in previous years, that's a bit of a tricky area with the congestion there, the turn and so forth. And so this puts the access off the other side of the building, which is much less of an impact. So support this.
Thanks, I just want to make a comment about that. Tilt-up buildings are economical for the builders, but they don't translate into cheaper rents for the tenants. The rents in the business park are now well exceed the rents in downtown. So the idea that construction is economical and passes on to the consumer is not true. Our economy, it's all market economy and supply and demand. This feeds a little bit more supply. But since we have no more, our demand exceeds our supply. That's something that maybe lawyers don't know about supply and demand.
Oh, let's not take cheap shots at lawyers, even though it's
at lawyers, it's so
target.
easy though.
This I believe meets the DP guidelines. I agree, it's not necessarily the type of building that's causing excessive rents, it's zoning and uses and supply and demand, so I think there is some work to be done in Business Park, but generally speaking, I'm pleased to see this whole corner create a sort of a nice entrance to that part of the business park. And for tilt-ups, I actually was pretty pleased with how these look. I think the landscaping will be really nice in that area as well, considering it is business park. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is a tender award for the third PRV replacement project. This is going to be really quick, right?
Yes, really quick.
Council, does council want a presentation on this, or are there any questions? Would you like a presentation? Does someone want to move the tender award? Moved by Councillor Kent. Is there a seconder? I'll second. Councillor Reese seconds that. Do you want to speak to it?
No, it's something we need to have done. Save you the time.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There is also a tender award for well drilling. Chris, do you think we should have a report on this?
I do. You, I suppose.
Okay. Why don't we do this one?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Wilson. I'm Manager of Municipal Infrastructure, here to discuss the award of tender to complete the drilling of a production well and a new monitoring well at Powerhouse Springs. So, quick background on the project is that in 2017, the district decommissioned one of our 7 wells due to ongoing operations and maintenance issues. And since then, there hasn't been much of a margin between demand and supply and the amount that we're able to supply. So this project will drill a new well to replace the lost capacity and also to increase the overall capacity of our well field in order to accommodate 5 to 10 years of additional community growth. This is the first phase in this 2-phase project. The next phase will be to add a pump and tie it into our electrical and communication systems. Under this same tender, we're also going to be drilling a new monitoring well at the 3-month capture zone of the Ring Creek Aquifer. That's to allow for monitoring of long-term trends in our aquifer level and also to allow for water quality testing in the unforeseen event that there was a contaminant spill within the watershed. In terms of procurement, the district issued the tender package on BC Bid and we received 2 bids. The low bid was provided by Fife Well and Water Services. It's noted that they did fail to supply a consent of surety for a performance bond and a labor and material bond. The other bid, so the high bid, was Drill Well Enterprises, but they also submitted a non-compliant tender package. And so since there were no compliant bids, it gives the district the ability to use our privilege clause, which is contained in the tender package. And on that basis, we recommend to award this contract to the low bidder, Fife, on the basis of providing the best value to the district, subject to them providing a consent of surety to provide the performance bonding and labor material bonding. They indicated that it was a misunderstanding on their part in not supplying that bonding or the consent of surety for the bonding, and there will be no additional cost to the district in order to get that bonding. So with that, it's recommended to award the contract to Fife, subject to receiving the consent of surety for performance bonding.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? And this is part of our water master plan. This fulfills some of our objectives within that.
Correct. Yeah. And the well protection plan as well.
I don't see any questions. Council, would someone like to move it? I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor, maybe I'll just make a quick comment. It is great that we are very strategically moving our water and well protection and plans like that forward. And this is just one step in that process. I mean, I think kudos to staff and to council for being very diligent about creating these master plans and very strategically and diligently moving through to get this infrastructure done in a proactive manner. So thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
There's a consent agenda in front of council. Looking if council members would like to pull anything from the consent agenda. Seeing none, is there someone who would like to move the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Pryor. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. There were no late agenda items. Correspondence requesting action. There's a couple letters. Oh yes, there was a late agenda item. It just being brought forward from the closed meeting, and I'll just read this. That council appoint the following representatives to the advisory design panel for a 2-year term ending September 20th, Jenna Butchko from the BC Society of Landscape Architects, and my apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. Carlos Zavarse from the Urban Development Institute, Tanis Schulte from the Architectural Institute of BC, David Arnott from the Architectural Institute of BC, Sarah Tipler, Enterprise and Accessible Design, and 2 members at large, Mike Van Hell, and Graham Winterbottom. There are 2 letters regarding a bus stop on Glacier View Drive, and there's a recommended motion that we refer to staff. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Blackman-Wolf. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There are a couple letters regarding pedestrian safety on Judd Road. This is an ongoing issue, and I know Judd Road upgrades are in our capital plan, but at this point, we'll look to refer this to staff, and I suspect it will come back to us at some point. Natasha, do you want to add to that, or?
No, just some questions about if enforcement would be helpful, or parking restrictions, or that kind of thing, but we're looking at it. We'll bring it back.
Thank you. I don't think we need it. We don't need a motion. We just need to rise on it. Move refer to staff. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And then there's a third item, correspondence regarding BC Transit complaint, and we'll refer this to staff as well. We expect all of these things to come back to council for some sort of response. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Chappelle. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We didn't pull anything from the consent agenda for minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we've already done our staff in-camera announcements. There is no unscheduled public attendance. Open question period for clarification related to agenda item. Anyone has a, no, don't see any hands. And councillor staff announcements. I had about 30 members from a forestry students master's program at UBC come to speak to me. We have a lot of interest from UBC forestry that come up to Squamish to look at Squamish as an example of a place where forestry is still a going concern here. It's evolved, but there's a community that's diversified around it. So we get a lot of interest from UBC students and from international students. I think all of council attended, except Councillor Kent attended UBCM last week. Just for the public's information, we had 3 meetings with ministers, one with Minister Dix around regional, rural sexual assault response across the province, really, obviously focusing in on Sea to Sky. Presented him with a possibility of a pilot project that was floated by a local doctor here about mobile response, 24/7 mobile response unit in Sea to Sky and Sunshine Coast, and talked about hospice as well, and some of our challenges with VCH and the tendering process with regard to hospice. Good meeting. We had a meeting with Minister Farnworth about average speed over distance with the Mayor of Lions Bay. I think there's look for some community engagement on that topic in the near future, as we understand what the benefits may be of doing a pilot project somewhere in BC. Could be in Sea to Sky, could be in Malhat, but we wanted to further that conversation with Minister Farnworth. And we also talked about, with Minister Trevena, the Minister of Transportation, the BC Rail mandate to sell their lands and how it affects communities, and how we are suggesting that the mandate be changed to incorporate community values in their evaluation process as they dispose of their lands. We also had a regional transportation meeting with Minister Trevena with the mayors of all the local governments in the region, as well as the chair of the regional district and staff. And essentially wanting to bring Minister Trevina up to speed on the Regional Transportation Initiative, that we're still hoping to be, the timelines will be such that regional transportation will be in place by September 2019. We still have to, amongst all the local governments in the area, fine-tune the governance structure that will regulate or mandate that service, as well as funding. And we talked about funding options with the minister, but essentially we wanted to make sure the minister understood that we progressed with an MOU with all the parties, including First Nations, that it forms a bit of a structure around what this governance model, this commission might look like, and that we were still trying to be on track for September 19th, and that we hope that their processes were still aligned with that, so getting their purchasing in to get the buses and to make sure that those operational dollars are in their upcoming budget process. Lots of other meetings on UBCM. I'm not sure if councillors want to reflect on that. I'll go to Councillor Carter.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to comment on the audience, and you know, we've got an election coming up. One of the things I've always said to people if they were running for council, come to the meetings, see what goes on in there. And I see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, there's 6 or 7 of them back there, and I just wondered if, I don't know all these people, would it be okay if they introduced themselves?
No, not in this forum.
Oh, no?
No.
I'd like you all to get in touch with me if you don't mind me so. It is a really good thing, and I don't know, I mean, I think we should be able to let you, I want to know who you are. I don't know why the mayor doesn't let me find that out, but.
You can do it. I think it's very clear, and maybe Ms. Arthurs wants to speak to it, that the municipality remain neutral in the election, and that this is not the appropriate place to be doing that.
That's right, and the council chambers for council right now is opposed to a candidate platform.
Yeah.
So that also goes to show you, after 7 years sitting here, you still have lots of stuff to learn. I thank all you guys for showing up. I really appreciate that.
Councillor Elliott.
I just wanted to also mention that Squamish put a motion forward to the floor at UBCM, and this was in regards to asking the province to give municipalities the ability to verify electronic submissions submitted to a public hearing process when council has strong belief that they are not, what's the word? Accurate. Valid. And that passed unanimously on the floor, and I think it's because local governments recognize that meddling in decisions doesn't just happen at a federal level. In countries, it's actually happening at the local level as well. So it was good to see that pass.
Yeah, and really that was about a modernization of the Act. The Act really doesn't contemplate the digital age where falsifying of Facebook and emails and it is so easy. We also had a motion that passed as part of a block on telcos. Currently, under the legislation, the local government can't assist business. However, we can give monies to telco companies for telecommunication purposes. In today's digital age, again, it's about modernizing the Act. A lot of the IP providers for small, rural internet service are done through small IP providers. And ironically, if TELUS, for example, was trying to put internet up in Grand Creek or Upper Squamish, Upper Paradise Valley, we could, as a local government, give a large telco monies to do that, but we can't give small internet IPs those monies because the legislation hasn't modernized to keep up with the fact that that's who's providing to these rural and remote communities. Ironically, 80% of their funding, if not more, is coming from provincial and federal governments. So federal and provincial governments can facilitate this important utility growth, but local governments can. So we asked that. And then we also had a motion about these covenants on that are mostly set up in the 60s, whereby the agreement between the landowner and the land developer doesn't exist anymore. And that one passed unanimously as well. I think those were the only 3 resolutions we had. Yep.
This has nothing to do with UBCM, but it's Yom Kippur, and I want to get out of here.
Okay. I'm not quite finished. I just, congratulations again. We had another multicultural festival on the weekend. Amazing, there was so much rain, but there were still people out there dancing and celebrating diversity and food and art and everything. It was fantastic. And I do want to make one quick comment just on the Geraldine Springs development. It's been a long haul on that, and I do want to thank council for generally being very respectful of each other, regardless of difference of opinion. I think there was some defamatory and quite vitriolic communications on social media and that type of thing, but council was always very respectful of each other, and I really appreciate that, that responsiveness amongst all of us, so thank you very much. There's stuff coming up this week, but I can't remember it, and it's Yom Kippur, so I'm going to look for Councillor Chappelle to move termination of meeting.
Move termination. Happy Yom Kippur.
Seconded, I'll
Happy
second that. All
reconciling.
those in favor? Opposed, motion carries.